Chapter 589. Baikong's eyes lit up and slightly nodded. That's right. Brother Bing, it's easy to prove your disciple's innocence. Let him follow me to the headquarters and confront Niu Yud. At that time, everything will be clear. If it really has nothing to do with Yan Xueqi, I promise to send him safely back to Snowy Mountain. At the same time, he looked at Ju with a gentle gaze. This method was simply the best for him. Once Yan Xueqi meets with Niu Yud, whether it's true or not, his world commerce wouldn't be able to escape. If Niu Yud could prove that Yan Xueqi indeed had a peerless martial art, then everyone wouldn't need to fight over him anymore. Yan Xueqi was already in his hands. If Niu Yud was lying, then he wouldn't be able to leave the world commerce so easily. One must know that the headquarters of the world commerce was filled with experts. With Baikong personally overseeing it, 2 spirit-severing disciples, and a bunch of late-stage crossing tribulation experts, not many people in the cultivation world could come and go as they pleased. Yan Xueqi didn't know what to say. There was no reason to refuse. He couldn't help but look at Bing Qingzi. Bing Qingzi naturally couldn't let Baikong take Yan Xueqi away. Although he repeatedly denied the fact that Yan Xueqi had a peerless martial art, he was well aware that what Niu Yud said was true. Just think about it. Niu Yud was actually able to see through Yan Xueqi's background with a single glance. With such ability, Yan Xueqi would probably have nowhere to hide in front of him, and he wouldn't be able to hide it even if he wanted to. At that time, he would probably not be able to return. Everyone's gazes also looked at Bing Qingzi to see what he would say. To prove Yan Xueqi's innocence, Ju's method was the best. If he didn't agree, then he definitely had a guilty conscience. Hee. Then don't blame everyone for being impolite and snatching what should be snatched. Baikong, I don't deny that your method isn't good. Bing Qingzi said in a deep voice. But if I let you take my disciple away in front of me today, then where would I put my face in the future? If I can't even protect my own disciple, then as his master, I won't be able to show my face in the future. Hearing this, many people exchanged glances. Sure enough, he still had a guilty conscience. All of them stared at Yan Xueqi with interest, eager to make a move. Hee. Baikong smirked and said, Brother Bing, this won't do, that won't do. Do you have any way to prove Yan Xueqi's innocence? Now that things have come to this, I'm sure you're also aware that this matter has to be resolved. Seeing that everyone was pressuring their master, the hot-tempered 7th disciple could no longer bear it and shouted, What have we done wrong to you? We need to prove our innocence to you. Baikong's gaze was like lightning as he stared at the 7th brother. He sneered and said, This old man is talking to your master. Since when is it your turn to interrupt? Bing Qingzi raised his hand slightly and stopped the furious 7th brother from speaking again. He said to Baikong, I naturally have a way to prove Yan Xueqi's innocence. Then we'll be all ears. Baikong put on a fake smile. Obviously, he didn't believe it. Everyone stared at Bing Qingzi, waiting to see what he could say. Bing Qingzi's cold eyes swept across the crowd. With a wave of his hand, the profound ice sword suddenly appeared in his hand. This action startled everyone. They all thought that he was going to make a move. Who knew that a dang sound could be heard? Bing Qingzi flicked the sword with his finger and a crisp sound reverberated in the air. He raised the sword and said in a clear voice, I, Bing Qingzi, swear to the heavens that if my disciple Yan Xueqi possesses a peerless martial art, let me, Bing Qingzi, die a horrible death in the future. Absolute silence. Everyone was silent. Everyone was dumbfounded. They didn't expect Bing Qingzi to be so ruthless. He even made a deadly oath. This, Baikong and the others looked at each other. If they didn't believe it before, then what about now? Even if they were beaten to death, they wouldn't believe that Bing Qingzi would use his life to make a false oath. Man Hu and the others who recovered from the shock couldn't help but shout, Master! Yan Xueqi silently stared at Bing Qingzi. He owed this sect too much. Only the few of them knew that Yan Xueqi did possess a peerless martial art, the demonic book. However, their master made a false oath. This would definitely be punished by the heavens in the cultivation world. Bing Qingzi waved his hand at them and said, It's nothing. Since we can't explain it clearly to them, we'll use facts to prove it. Otherwise, we'll have endless troubles in the future. He then stared at the 5 of them and said indifferently, Everyone, do you believe me now? Pei Fong, Qi Jujuan, and O Yongda looked at each other. They felt it was a pity to let Bing Chengzi go just like that. Originally, they wanted to take this opportunity to kill him. However, it wasn't a good time to do so. Once they started fighting, Yin Baikong and Hu Chongsho wouldn't just sit back and watch. Yin Baikong and Hu Chongsho's expressions were a little awkward. The former smiled and said, "Brother Bing, don't misunderstand. Since the matter has been clarified, it's naturally fine. I hope Brother Bing won't take it to heart and understand." The change was really fast. However, the three of them were originally in a group of benefits. As long as there weren't any other benefits that could split the three of them, the past would naturally be the past. After all, they still had to deal with each other in the future. They were all experienced people and wouldn't be swayed by their emotions. They only knew what was true. Humph! Bing Chengzi coldly snorted and said, "Let's go." Under everyone's gaze, the master and disciples rode on the snow flood dragon and soared into the sky. "Brother Bing, have a safe journey." Yin Baikong and Hu Chongsho cupped their hands and sent them off. The group of gathered experts looked down again. They didn't know where their anger came from. Yin Baikong pointed down and stared at Sikongju as he shouted, "What exactly is going on? Yan Xueqi and the others have already escaped. Why are you all still fighting here?" Sweat appeared on Sikongju's forehead. He didn't know what the hell was going on. He turned around and called Zhang Zuanxing, who was also battered and exhausted, to question him. The lords of various countries also gathered their subordinates to reprimand them, asking them what exactly was going on. In the end, after a long discussion, one of them said that he saw someone fighting and went to help, while the other said that he saw someone fighting and went to help. They didn't know what they were fighting for. Only in the end did they understand. The main culprit was Bing Chengzi's disciple. Because he released the sky-shaking arrow to lure the enemies, a group of people swarmed over and messed up the plan. This made the lords of various countries unbearably angry. This matter definitely couldn't be blamed on Bing Chengzi's disciple. He didn't do anything to provoke him. If they wanted to blame someone, they could only blame themselves for being blind. As a result, they all started scolding him. The lords of various countries had a bellyful of anger. Before they even returned to their own territories, some of them were already furious. Hero had looted 90 spirit stone mines in half a day. At the same time, he had committed crimes in 90 different countries. Every country was shocked. Hero had obviously taken advantage of the time when the country's defenses were at their weakest. However, Hero didn't go too far this time. He only killed people and didn't blow up the mines. However, the number of cultivators killed in 90 mines added up to a terrifying number. Although most of them were low-level cultivators, there were more than 20,000 cultivators. On average, there were 200 to 300 people killed in each mine. Not a single one survived. This was a shocking massacre. He had killed more than 20,000 cultivators. The entire cultivation world was a little dumbfounded. This hero was too ruthless. How could he do it with so many people? As a result, they all condemned Hero. What made all the countries palpitate was that 90 different locations were attacked at the same time. How many people did he use? When did such a huge force hide in the cultivation world, and no one knew about it? The unknown was the scariest, and the unknown intentions were the scariest. For a moment, all the countries felt insecure. When talking about Hero, their expressions changed. They all mobilized people to protect the important locations, afraid that Hero would come to them again. The cultivation world, which had been a little restless recently, suddenly became much quieter. Currently, many people in the cultivation world were very depressed. Yu Qianqiu was one of them. After receiving the news that Yan Xueqi was safe and sound, he was extremely depressed. He didn't expect that Yan Xueqi would still escape even after being forced to such a state. Didn't this mean that Yan Xueqi was indeed a character from another angle? On a flying magical artifact, Yulan was controlling it. The wind and clouds brushed past the ship's side, quickly flying over thousands of mountains and rivers. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting at the back, suddenly sighed. Scourge! Scourge! He felt that the harder it was to kill Yan Xueqi, the more powerful he was. If he was left alive, he would definitely be a scourge in the future. He didn't know what logic was behind this. Senior, who are you calling scourge? Guan Zhongkai asked expressionlessly. After knowing that Yan Xueqi was fine, he was also in a bad mood. He had already been scolded by Ju, who said that he would deal with him when he returned. Since even his grandmaster had confirmed that Yan Xueqi was fine, it was most likely that Niu Yud was lying. This time, he had really caused his own death. However, this fella's cultivation was too high. Putting aside the fact that he couldn't beat him, he didn't even dare to scold him. He didn't even dare to show his face. Yulan, who was controlling the flying magical artifact, didn't look any better. His master, Shangguan Taiping, even had the heart to kill him. Who asked him to lie about military intelligence, causing his master to offend a large group of people. Ah! Yu Qianchou was stunned, then sighed. Nothing, I was talking about the hero. This hero is really a scourge. He actually killed so many people, sigh. Scourge. These 2 days, he had heard many people talking about the hero. Then where does Senior think the hero came from? Guan Zhongkai said perfunctorily. You're asking me? Yu Qianchou pointed at his nose, then suddenly chuckled. If you ask me, other than your World Commerce Association, I really can't think of anyone else with this ability. Think about it. The hero obviously took advantage of the moment when the country's defenses were at their weakest. Such a large-scale attack, it was obvious that they were prepared. And regarding Yan Xueqing's matter, your World Commerce Association was the first to know, right? You also had the best chance to set it up in advance, right? Plus, World Commerce Association has so many people and that kind of ability. So, this so-called hero is actually most likely your World Chamber of Commerce. Chapter 590. Senior's joke is too big. Guan Zhongkai's tone was not very confident and his eyes were slightly dazed. Hearing Niu Yud's words, he thought of something. As the third-generation head disciple of the World Commerce Association, he knew that the World Commerce Association was not as simple as it looked on the surface. Even though he was not deeply involved in some things, he still felt that something was wrong. Grandmaster Yin Baikong, other than having many wives and children, he also had many disciples. Who in the cultivation world didn't know that Grandmaster was very good at teaching disciples? He had taught 2 soul formation disciples and there were at least 100 tribulation passing experts. He didn't even know how many martial uncles he had. This was also one of the main reasons why the World Commerce Association was so powerful in the cultivation world. In the eyes of outsiders, these martial uncles were the backbone of the World Commerce Association's headquarters. They were always stationed in the treasure bowl and Grandmaster Yin Baikong rarely used them. But he unintentionally discovered that these martial uncles seemed to be doing something in the dark. There was once when he went to ask his master but was reprimanded by his master, telling him not to worry so much and to do his own thing. Guan Zhongkai had always had doubts in his heart, but hearing Niu Yud's words, he was suddenly enlightened. At the same time, he was secretly shocked. Could it be that hero was really a force of the World Commerce Association? Yu Qianchou's eyelids twitched when he saw his appearance. He glanced at Yu Landou, who seemed to be listening attentively, and his lips curled into a smile. Then he poked his head out and said patiently, I'm right. Did you remember something? Ah. Guan Zhongkai came back to his senses and repeatedly denied. Senior, you can't say such things. Our World Commerce Association is definitely not a hero. Think about it. Our World Commerce Association is also one of the victims this time. A spirit stone mine was also bathed in blood by hero. Hee. You can fool others but you can't fool me. Yu Qianchou winked and smiled evilly. The reason why hero looted World Commerce Association's spirit stone mine was to help World Commerce clear of suspicion. Otherwise, others would always suffer and only your World Commerce Association would be fine. Plus, only World Commerce Association has the ability to do such a big thing. It would be strange if outsiders didn't suspect you. That's why. Your World Chamber of Commerce is very smart and ruthless. In order to deceive people, they killed their own people to divert everyone's suspicion. The more Yu Qianchou spoke, the more reasonable it became. Even the fake became the truth in his words. This gave Guan Zhongkai a fright. In particular, when he subconsciously turned his head to look at Yu Landou in front of him, he saw that Niu Yud was listening attentively to their conversation. This caused Guan Zhongkai to groan incessantly. He wanted nothing more than to stuff Niu Yud's mouth with something. He could only blame himself for having nothing better to do. Of all the things he could have asked, he had to ask this question. If word of this got out, the World Commerce Association would immediately become the target of public criticism. At that time, Master would definitely skin him alive. Absolutely impossible. Senior might not know this, but back then, the first person Hero kidnapped was my Grandmaster's grandson. This matter was known by the entire cultivation world. This robbery of the Spirit Stone Mine is the second time they have targeted our world commerce. If our world commerce is a hero, we can't always target ourselves. Guan Zhongkai couldn't wait to clear his name. Since the journey is boring, Lousy will play with you. Yu Qianchou sneered and lazily leaned on the back of the boat, saying, "Don't argue, some things can't withstand scrutiny. Let me ask you, why did Hero kidnap someone from your World Commerce Association the first time he appeared and not someone else? Did they want to show that they had nothing to do with World Commerce Association the moment they appeared? Also, why did the hero only harm others once, but only your World Commerce Company twice?" Little did they know, the more someone tries to clear their name, the more suspicious that person is. Guan Zhongkai's forehead was covered in sweat from his words. He looked at Yu Landu in front of him from time to time and said with a bitter smile, "Senior, Hero really has nothing to do with our World Commerce Association." "I said don't argue with me." Yu Qianchou crossed his legs and said, "If you continue to argue, do you believe that I can even deduce the reason and motive behind your actions?" Guan Zhongkai was truly speechless. If he didn't continue to argue, did he have to admit the truth? After thinking about it, he decided not to say it. If he continued, he would definitely get sick from fright. He immediately changed the topic. "Senior, let's get down to business. Last time you said that Yan Xueqi had exceptional martial arts, but after my Grandmaster and the others investigated, it was completely false. We're about to reach World Commerce Association. Have you thought about how to explain it to my Grandmaster?" Actually, Guan Zhongkai had always been puzzled. The matter had been exposed, proving that Niu Yud was lying, but why did Niu Yud still look as if nothing had happened? Was he not afraid at all? Investigation. Yu Qianchou said disdainfully, "Only found a false result? Your Grandmaster Yin Baikong's foresight is very suspicious. Let Yan Xueqi try in front of me. Humph. Others might not know, but do you think you don't? Did you forget the scene of Yan Xueqi fleeing after being exposed by me that day?" With this said, Guan Zhongkai recalled the scene of Yan Xueqi and the others leaving that day. It was indeed very suspicious. He couldn't help but nod. "I'm afraid you'll have to personally explain this matter to my Grandmaster. We won't be able to explain it clearly." "Explain my ass. It's up to him whether he believes it or not. I didn't ask him to chase after Yan Xueqi. It's none of my business." Yu Qianchou sneered. "So what if I don't explain? What can your Grandmaster do to me? Crazy." Guan Zhongkai was stunned. He was still hoping to bring him to the headquarters and let him explain to Grandmaster himself. If he explained clearly, he would feel better. But from his tone, he actually wanted to play hard on Grandmaster. If he angered Grandmaster, then wouldn't it be a great sin for him as the person who brought him here? Endless towering mountains and precipitous ridges, a primordial forest left from ancient times. Under the endless greenery was eerie and terrifying. The forest was densely covered with wisteria, and all kinds of ferocious beasts frequently appeared, letting out fierce roars. This was within the borders of the Tu-A nation, where the World Commerce Association was located. Yu Qianchou lay on the side of the flying artifact, looking at the retreating mountain scenery below. Only cultivators would settle down and live in such a dangerous place. If it was a mortal, it would probably be very difficult to go deep. He played with a pile of silver balls in his hands, and occasionally threw one down, as if he was shooting birds. The other two felt their teeth ache watching. The mountain terrain in front suddenly became dangerous, and there were occasional mountain peaks that rose abruptly. Yu Qianchou walked to the front of the flying artifact, and saw clouds and mist swirling in the distance. There was a tall mountain standing in the clouds and mist. Although it wasn't very tall, its altitude was obviously higher than the surrounding mountains. In the midst of being ethereal, it had a bit of a fairyland feeling. Yu Qianchou raised his chin and asked, "That should be the God of Wealth Peak, right?" Guan Zhongkai, who had switched hands to control the flying artifact, replied, "That's right. The place protected by the clouds and mist is the cornucopia, And that highest peak is the World Commerce Association's headquarters, the God of Wealth Peak's core area. Saying this, he shook his head with a bitter smile. Speaking of which, it's all thanks to Senior. We can directly land on the God of Wealth Peak, and don't need to enter from the entrance. In all these years, this is the first time I have the right to directly descend upon the God of Wealth Peak. Yu Qianqiu folded his arms and rubbed his chin. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Entering from the entrance, I want to see what the world-renowned cornucopia looks like. Guan Zhongkai nodded and didn't say much. In reality, he was also a little apprehensive because he had made a mistake and didn't dare to see his grandmaster. If he could delay it, it would be good to see him later. Very soon, the flying artifact landed at the foot of the mountain between two peaks. These two mountains weren't tall, but they looked quite strange. They were like twins, almost identical in appearance. Standing at the edge of the clouds and mist, they were like two guards standing there silently, adding a bit of mystery to this place. Guan Zhongkai put away the flying artifact and said to Yu Qianqiu, who was looking around, Senior, please follow me. Yu Qianqiu nodded and followed the two people in front of him, one on the left and one on the right. After going deep into the clouds and mist, he realized that this fog was really not ordinary thick. With his cultivation, his visibility was at most 3 meters. After walking between the two mountains, he realized that there was actually a cliff in front of him. A chain bridge extended from the clouds and mist to the side of the cliff. Judging from the direction of the thick main chain that was pulling the suspension bridge, the fixed place should be between the two mountains. Walking on the bridge, Yu Qianqiu didn't understand. What's the meaning of this? Can't we just fly over directly? Why do we need to make a suspension bridge? Guan Zhongkai walked as he turned back and explained. Senior, you may not know this, but because this is where our sect's headquarters is located, the security here is very tight. This cloud and mist isn't an ordinary defensive formation. It's an extremely powerful killing formation. The only way for outsiders to enter and exit this place is this suspension bridge. When crossing this bridge, if anyone leaves the vicinity of this bridge, they will immediately be sucked into this killing formation. Of course, people with the sect's permission will open other paths to enter and exit. Yulandu also turned back and said, also this path can be sealed at any time. Yu Qianqiu clicked his tongue and said, this defense is indeed quite tight. It's very hard for people who want to go in and cause trouble to break in. It's even harder for people who want to come out after causing trouble to escape. That's natural. The World Commerce Association has always done its best to provide the safest trading ground for cultivators in the world. Guan Zhongkai said rather proudly. The three of them walked for nearly 200 meters before reaching the end of this bridge. In front of them was a cave. On both sides of the cave, there were two large tiger heads peeking out. They were very lifelike and looked like they were made of black iron. The two main chains of the suspension bridge were spat out from the tiger's mouth. It was very mighty and extraordinary. After entering the cave, it was bright inside and was filled with fluorescent stones for illumination. About 5 or 6 meters into the cave, they discovered that there was a stone room dug out on both sides of the cave. There were several cultivators sitting in each room. Yu Qianqiu looked left and right and found that there was actually no one he could see through their cultivation. Chapter 591. As expected of the headquarters of the World Chamber of Commerce. Even the gatekeepers were at least at the Tribulation passing stage. Yu Qianqiu was secretly awed. Guan Zhongkai cupped his hands in greeting and greeted, Martial Uncle. Yulan followed suit and cupped her hands in greeting. A man walked out from each of the two stone chambers and nodded at Yulan. His gaze fell on Yu Qianqiu. Guan Zhongkai hurriedly introduced, this is Niu Yud, Senior Niu. He's someone Grandmaster wishes to see. This disciple has been ordered to lead the way. So it's Mr. Niu. One of the men cupped his hands in a more amiable manner. Yu Qianqiu nodded in acknowledgement. The other man had a taut face and a serious expression. He frowned and asked, Guan Zhongkai, since you're honorable master's guest, why are you walking here? Guan Zhongkai replied, Senior Niu wishes to see the scenery of Cornucopia and specifically requested to enter from here. The man replied, Mr. Niu, to enter from here, you need a jade archive as a guide. Do you have one on you? Yu Qianqiu could hear a hint of displeasure in his tone. He thought to himself, did I offend you? He calmly shook his head and said, "No. Then there's no other way. I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to turn back and enter through a special passage. The rules here cannot be broken," the man said expressionlessly. Guan Zhongkai was stunned. Yulan also looked left and right in astonishment. The other man with a more amiable expression said in a low voice, "Junior Marshal Brother, don't be rash. This is Honorable Master's guest." He cupped his hands in greeting and smiled at Yu Qianqiu. "Mister, please don't be offended. My junior marshal brother has always been like this. Please follow me and apply for a Jade Archive. After that, you'll be able to enter and exit freely." "So it's possible to apply for a Jade Archive?" Yu Qianqiu chuckled. He stared at the unfriendly man and asked softly, "So you're saying that you're deliberately making things difficult for me by asking me to turn back?" Guan Zhongkai was shocked. He had personally experienced Niu Yud's prowess. Moreover, Niu Yud had a bad temper. Even his master couldn't handle him. Immediately he bowed repeatedly and said, "Senior, please calm down, calm down." Even Yulan took a step back, her eyes darting around as if she was ready to watch a good show. The person with the amiable expression also came out to smooth things over. "It's just a small matter, don't take it to heart, don't take it to heart. Junior brother, hurry up and apologize to Mr." Who would have thought that the man would say with a cold face, "Apologize? I didn't say anything wrong. Without the Jade Archive as a guide, we can't enter from here. Not to mention, I didn't stop him from applying for the Jade Archive." "All right." Yu Qianqiu put on a fake smile and said, "You've got guts to provoke me. You must be tired of living." As soon as he finished speaking, a majestic, cold and terrifying aura suddenly erupted from his body, instantly filling the entire passageway. "Senior, please calm down," Guan Zhongkai said in a panic, but just as he said that, the rest of the words in his mouth were forced back by that extremely terrifying aura, and his entire body began to tremble. He thought to himself, "It's over." The temperature in the cave instantly dropped below freezing point. Coupled with the bone-chilling aura, everyone was implicated. Even the people in the stone chambers on both sides were no exception. Everyone's teeth were chattering. The person with the amiable expression was terrified. He slowly raised his hand and said, "Senior." He realized that it was extremely difficult for him to speak. The person with the unkind tone was in trouble. Yu Qianqiu mobilized the terrifying aura of the black flame and didn't hesitate to heavily punish him. This caused him to roll his eyes continuously. After swaying for a while, he couldn't take it anymore and fell to the ground with a plop. He didn't wake up, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. "Humph." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly and said, "Seeing that we might become family in the future, I'll spare your life. If there's a next time, I'll kill you without mercy. Even if Baikong comes, he won't be able to protect you." The terrifying aura in the cave quickly disappeared with his last words and returned to normal. But the others still felt their bodies stiffen. They couldn't recover for a while, and they all looked at Niu Yud in fear. Guan Zhongkai looked at the unconscious martial uncle on the ground and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought to himself, "Why did you have to do this? You even dragged the others into this." Yu Landu was even more shocked when he activated his internal energy to dispel the terrifying aura that had seeped into his body. He knew that Niu Yud was powerful, but he had never experienced it himself. He didn't expect him to be this powerful. He didn't even need to lift a finger to deal with an expert at the end of the crossing calamity stage. Just that terrifying aura alone was enough to deal with him. He had to inform Master of this as soon as possible. The group of people gradually regained their mobility. The first thing the amiable person did was to squat down to check on his junior. He was relieved to find that he was still alive but unconscious. He waved his hand and summoned 2 people from the stone chamber to carry his junior away. Then he cupped his fists and apologized. "Thank you for your mercy, Senior. Please follow me to complete the Jade Archive." He knew that the person in front of him wasn't someone he could afford to offend. Yu Qianqiu followed him expressionlessly. That person personally took out a Jade Archive and asked Yu Qianqiu to imbue a strand of true origin into it. Then, he immediately inscribed a set of incantations into the Jade Archive. Soon, the incantations were completed and handed to Yu Qianqiu. "How many spirit stones do you need?" Yu Qianqiu waved the Jade Archive in his hand. That person waved his hand and said, "Senior is my master's honored guest. How could I dare to accept your spirit stones?" Then, he gave Guan Zhongkai a look. Guan Zhongkai understood and hurried over to invite Yu Qianchou to leave. Yu Qianchou couldn't be bothered to waste his time here and left with the two of them. That person remained behind Miao Yi and bowed, saying, "Farewell, senior." Then, he smiled bitterly and shook his head, slowly letting out a sigh. He thought to himself, "I've finally sent this terrifying guy away." How terrifying! With his hands behind his back, Yu Qianchou walked forward. The people standing in the passageway hurriedly made way for the three of them. They all stood on either side of him and looked at him with reverence. These people were cultivators from various places who had to pass through the passageway. They didn't expect to bump into the famous Niu Yud here. Not to mention, they even got to watch the show. However, the aura that filled the cave just now was too terrifying. Even now, everyone still hadn't fully recovered from it. After walking for a short distance, they discovered a profound light screen blocking their path. The color of the light screen was almost exactly the same as the luster of the fluorite. If they weren't careful, they would definitely bump into it. The three of them took out their jade archives and imbued their true origin into it. A ray of white light struck the light screen and 3 holes just wide enough for 3 people to pass through appeared. After the 3 of them passed through, the light screen quickly closed up again. Such a profound wave light screen, in the short passage of nearly 100 meters, actually had 3 obstructions. Yu Qianchou couldn't help but sigh at the tight security of the World Chamber of Commerce. If someone caused trouble and wanted to escape, even if they could break through these 3 light screens, it would still take them some time. Similarly, people who tried to barge in from the outside would face the same problem. Meanwhile, the World Chamber of Commerce would have enough time to react and respond. Once they exited the cave, their eyes suddenly lit up. A bustling city was right in front of them. It was built in a basin surrounded by mountains. It was hard to imagine that such a bustling city could actually exist in such a desolate and uninhabited primeval forest. Yu Qianchou couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. This was a cornucopia. It really did look like a basin. It was far bigger than the Hundred Flowers Valley, and far more lively than the Hundred Flowers Valley. Although it wasn't as big as the capitals of the various countries that Yu Qianchou had been to, the various buildings here were all exquisite. They couldn't be compared to the ordinary commoners' buildings in the secular world. Thinking about it, it made sense. Most of the buildings here were representatives of the various powers of the cultivation world. How could the secular world compare? The most conspicuous was the cone-shaped towering mountain in the middle of the buildings. The cultivation world's famous god of wealth peak stood in the center of the cornucopia, the core of the World Chamber of Commerce. All sorts of buildings surrounded the foot of the mountain, spreading out in a circular pattern. Guan Zhongkai saw the astonishment in Yu Qianchou's eyes and was somewhat pleased. He smiled and said, "Senior, this is our World Chamber of Commerce's headquarters. Please." He pointed to the steps beneath his feet and made an inviting gesture. Yu Qianchou nodded and the 3 of them followed the steps into the basin. Stepping into the bustling city, people came and went. It felt like the streets of the secular world. If they didn't know that this was the cultivation world's famous World Chamber of Commerce, who would have believed that they were currently in an important area of the cultivation world? On both sides of the street, there were pavilions with green tiles and vermilion eaves. Wine shops and commercial buildings could be found everywhere. There were even some places where new buildings were being built. As Yu Qianchou looked left and right, he couldn't help but sigh that Baikong was indeed a talent for business. He managed to manage such a remote place into such a prosperous place. On the way, they saw people constantly greeting Guan Zhongkai and Yu Lan. However, when they saw the 2 of them respectfully accompanying a middle-aged man, they couldn't help but look at him in astonishment. They felt that he looked a little unfamiliar. But then they remembered that the 2 of them had been accompanying a certain person in the cultivation world during this period of time. Their expressions changed slightly as they remembered who that person was. Not long after, the news that Niu Yud had arrived at the World Chamber of Commerce spread through the entire cornucopia at lightning speed. Dormant Spring. Yu Qianchou stared at the signboard of a building and read it out loud. Then he looked at the dozen or so gorgeously dressed women downstairs. These women were basically all at the foundation establishment stage. They constantly tugged at the male cultivators passing by on the street. Yu Qianchou opened his mouth, thinking that he was seeing things. He asked the 2 of them blankly, What are they doing? Soliciting customers. Yulan said disapprovingly. Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief. Could this be a brothel? There are brothels in the cultivation world? Do cultivators do this? Are they being forced? When he said this, his expression didn't look too good. Guan Zhongkai explained, no one is forcing them, they're all voluntary. Some itinerant cultivators don't have a source of spirit stones and want to continue cultivating in the cultivation world, so there are many who do this. After they save up enough spirit stones, they'll concentrate on cultivating. When they run out of spirit stones, they might come out and continue doing this. Of course, this place isn't like the brothels in the secular world. They won't restrict personal freedom. Here, the brothel keeper takes a cut. If you want to do it, you can come and go. It's very convenient. Chapter 592. Very convenient? Yu Qianqiu's expression was lifeless. He really didn't expect that these immortals in the eyes of the secular world would actually be in this line of work. He subconsciously couldn't accept it. He shook his head helplessly and said, they're all quite good-looking. Of all the things they could do, why do they have to be in this line of work? Yulan looked at him with a somewhat strange expression. It was the kind of expression that seemed to say that he didn't understand the suffering of the world. She smiled and said, Senior's cultivation is profound. I'm afraid you rarely come into contact with low-level cultivators, especially those itinerant cultivators. They'll do anything for spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, who said that? I've come into contact with many itinerant cultivators in Ghost Manor, but I've never heard of cultivators in this line of work. Yulan smiled and said, who would go around talking about it after doing this line of work? It's only made public in cornucopia. In fact, there are many itinerant cultivators out there who do wild work, but it's not safe. They often put in the effort but don't get anything in return. They might even get themselves killed. That's right. Guan Zhongkai nodded and said, it's different here. As long as they pay taxes, they'll receive the protection of world commerce. They'll get something in return if they put in the effort. Are these people all itinerant cultivators? Yu Qianqiu asked as he stared at Spring Slumber. Of course. Cultivators with sex all have a source of spirit stones. Who would do this? Yulan said. When I was in Ghost Manor, I heard that there are many female itinerant cultivators who marry into sex. Those male itinerant cultivators can't even find a partner for dual cultivation. Why don't they find a sex disciple to marry? Yu Qianqiu asked. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and smiled. The latter said disdainfully, there are female itinerant cultivators who marry into sex, but they're very few. How many of these female itinerant cultivators who have been fooling around outside for so long are still virgins? In order to survive, who knows how many people they've dual cultivated with? Most of the sex disciples are just playing around. It's not easy to marry them. It's already not easy to get past the elders of the sect. Which sect would accept prostitutes? Wouldn't we become a laughingstock if word got out? Guan Zhongkai nodded in agreement and said, if he really is a talented loose cultivator, the various sects will fight to recruit him. However, there are very few who marry into the sect. What Senior has heard are all rumors and cannot be trusted. Actually, the situation of female loose cultivators is even worse than that of male loose cultivators. However, they are also more vain. They do things that they have to swallow and pretend that they are living a good life. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Thinking about it, this era was different from his previous world. It was extremely feudal. Most of the legitimate marriages were first-hand goods. It was difficult to find a legitimate husband for second-hand goods and above. Besides, when he was doing well in his previous life, he seemed to have quite a number of subordinates who were in this line of work. Didn't he turn a blind eye to it? There was no reason for him to come here and have such a messy sympathy for others. The three of them had been standing there for a long time. Because of Guan Zhongkai, they had already alerted the brothel keeper inside. He saw a graceful and beautiful young woman swaying her hips as she walked out. She waved her hand from afar and shouted, I was wondering who it was. So it's Master Guan. You haven't been here for a long time. Yu Qianqiu looked at Guan Zhongkai suspiciously. It seemed that this guy was a regular here. Yulando had a calm expression as if this was normal. The young woman tried to drag Guan Zhongkai inside. Guan Zhongkai laughed and pushed her away, saying, I still have something to do today. Don't mess around. Master Yu, are you busy? The young woman stayed by Yulando's side again. Yulando also said that he had something to do and pushed her away. In the end, the young woman stared at Yu Qianqiu again. She smiled coquettishly and said, I haven't seen this master before. Why don't you two introduce him to this servant? Although Yu Qianqiu didn't like this, he was happy to deal with such a knowledgeable person. He wanted to tease her a little. Suddenly, he heard a quarrel in Spring Slumber Loft. There were also faint sounds of fighting. The young woman's expression changed. She apologized to them and hurried back. Yulando laughed and said, Someone is making trouble in cornucopia. I wonder which family's young master is it? Guan Zhongkai's expression turned a little ugly. After a while, they saw 3 people pulling a woman out. The woman struggled with all her might and kept shouting, Let me go. A group of Orioles came out of Spring Slumber Loft and seemed to be watching the show. Looking at the scene, it didn't seem like someone was making trouble. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other. They didn't understand. Yu Qianqiu felt that the 3 men were familiar. He seemed to have seen them somewhere. Someone was making trouble in cornucopia. This was something new. Many people immediately rushed over to watch the show. At this time, the Orioles in Spring Slumber Loft opened a path. The beautiful young woman came out and indifferently walked in front of them. She said, I don't care what relationship you have. If you want to leave or stay, my Spring Slumber Loft can't stop the 3 of you. But the expenses of the 3 of you can't be less than 1 spirit stone. Also, you have to pay for everything broken inside. Otherwise, don't blame me for reporting you to the World Chamber of Commerce. Hearing the words World Chamber of Commerce, the 3 men seemed to remember where they were and subconsciously let go. The woman who was dragged out quickly walked to the young woman's side and stared at one of the men. I have nothing to do with you. Don't come looking for me again. The man clenched his fists and said, Didn't you say that the Blue Palace disciple wanted to marry you? Why did he come here to do this? He raised his hand and pointed at Spring Slumber Loft's signboard. Humph. There's no good man. The woman said disdainfully, I said I have nothing to do with you. It's none of your business whether I do this or not. You have a good way out. I can't stop you. That's why I let you go. But if I knew you were here for this, I wouldn't have let you go. The man shouted. Where's that man? Where is he? Didn't he say he would take you to Blue Palace? Why did he let you do this? The woman giggled as if she had heard a funny joke. She shook her head and said, He's a Blue Palace disciple. Of course he's in Blue Palace. So what if I tell you? What can the 3 of you do to a Blue Palace disciple? Hearing this, the people around them had a rough idea of what was going on. There was a flurry of discussion. The general gist of it was that the 2 of them used to be a couple. Later, a Blue Palace disciple took a fancy to the woman and took her away. The Blue Palace disciple was probably just fooling around. When he got bored, he dumped the woman. In the end, the woman fell into this line of work. Yu Qianqiu knew of the Blue Palace. It seemed to be the territory of Pei Feng, the man whose hand Wen Lanfeng had cut off. Don't let me run into him or I'll kill him, the man said fiercely. Ha ha! How arrogant! Someone in the crowd sneered. The person who spoke happened to be standing next to Yu Qianqiu. He walked up to the 3 people and said indifferently, I'm Lu Feng, and I happen to be a disciple of the Blue Palace. What did you just say? You want to kill a Blue Palace disciple? Say it again for me to hear. The 3 people turned around and stared at the person in front of them. They were so angry that their faces were red and their bodies trembled, but they didn't dare to say anything. There was a burst of laughter. They were laughing at the 3 people for overestimating themselves and talking big. Didn't they know that this was the World Chamber of Commerce? Did the Blue Palace also have business here? Yu Qianqiu slowly folded his arms. When he saw the faces of the 3 people, he remembered where he had seen them before. It was in Ghost Manor that he had talked back to Feng Ming. This protagonist who was so embarrassed that he couldn't show his face was called Tian Yi. He looked at them. Tian Yi was in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, and the 2 beside him were also in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. However, compared to Lu Feng, who was in the early stage of the Tribulation passing realm, they were still a bit weaker. In addition, they were from the Blue Palace, so there must be more than one person here. If they fought, they would definitely be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly and sighed. Seeing that the three people didn't dare to speak, Lu Feng was even more pleased. He pointed at the woman and said, "Isn't she just a wandering cultivator? My Blue Palace disciple is giving her face by messing with her." "What? You three are not convinced?" His words made the group burst into laughter again. The beautiful woman's expression changed. She bit her lip and didn't say anything. The disciples of the top 10 cultivators were so powerful that she couldn't afford to offend them. The muscles on Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He thought to himself, "Damn it! I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen such a despicable person. Even I don't dare to be so despicable. How dare she steal my limelight? I really can't stand it anymore. If I watch too much, I'll lose my appetite and lose face as a man. I'm a man, so I can't just stand by and watch." Yu Qianqiu nudged Yulan and Guan Zhongkai who were in front of him. The two didn't know what he was going to do, but they still moved aside. He walked out expressionlessly and stood quietly behind Lu Feng. Everyone's eyes were on him. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and felt that something was wrong. Amano and the other two looked over and were stunned. They had seen Niu Yud at Ghost Manor, so they naturally knew him, but they didn't expect to see him here. Seeing that everyone was looking over, Lu Feng thought that they were looking at him. He continued to be arrogant and proud. He pointed at Amano and the other two and said, "How dare you say that you want to kill the Blue Palace disciple in public? I think you must be tired of living." Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly felt someone pat his shoulder from behind. As soon as he turned his head, his vision blurred. Then, he heard a paw sound. His eardrums buzzed, and he felt a burning pain on his face. It was so painful that it was a little numb. Lu Feng staggered a few steps and shook his head to see clearly who had hit him. It was a middle-aged man with a smile on his face. He subconsciously asked, "Who are you?" Then, he remembered that he had been hit in public. He immediately shouted angrily, "You're courting death." Without another word, a blue flying knife flashed out of his pocket and directly shot towards the other party. Yu Qianqiu still looked at him with a smile on his face. The flying knife flew towards his chest, but he didn't dodge it. He just lightly flicked his finger at it. His movement was so casual that it was like he was chasing away a fly. With a clear ding sound, the blue knife paused in the air for a moment. Then, like a deflated balloon, it turned into sparkling blue powder and drifted to the ground. Chapter 593. Silence. It was really quiet. Everyone present was stunned. Those who were happily watching the show all opened their mouths wide. Lu Maple was even more dumbfounded. The magic artifact he used to attack his opponent had been turned into powder with a flick of his finger. Heavens! Who on earth was this guy? Just how high was his cultivation? He could actually shatter the magic artifact of the Blue Palace into powder with a flick of his finger. Isn't he a little too powerful? He was unbelievably strong. The chattering girls in the dormant spring house were as shocked as a flock of little quails. They had to sell themselves here because their cultivation was not high. They had never seen such a high level of skill. The eyes of the lady boss, who was as beautiful as a flower and had a graceful bearing, shone brightly. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and saw the lingering fear in each other's eyes. Previously, they felt that the terrifying aura that Niu Yud used to suppress people was a bit unorthodox. It was too different from the aura emitted by most masters. Perhaps there was still a gap between his real cultivation and that of the top 10 masters. But this flick of his finger could be said to have shocked them in a dignified manner. He had shattered the magic artifact of the Blue Palace into powder. This was not something that could be achieved by opportunistic means. This was the real deal. There was no earth-shattering aura, nor was there any frightening noise. There was only a soft ding. It was hard to imagine how much power was contained in this flick of his finger. This level of cultivation had probably reached the legendary return to simplicity stage. They believed that with the cultivation of the top 10 masters, they could also shatter the magic artifact in Lu Maple's hand. But to shatter it into powder, the two of them couldn't help but wonder if the top 10 masters could do it. They had heard that Niu Yud had shown this skill in the Ghost Manor before, but the concept of shattering it was only limited to shattering it. It was not as terrifying as what they saw now. Too strong. The two of them looked at Nyo Yud with more and more awe. This person was definitely a real top master. He is Nyo Yud, someone in the crowd said weakly. Ah, he is the ruthless judge Nyo Yud? Many people couldn't help but exclaim. Nowadays, who hadn't heard of the ruthless judge Nyo Yud? This name was very famous in the cultivation world. Recently, the cultivation world was not at peace. It could be said that he was an extremely daring person. He even dared to swindle the spirit stones of the top 10 experts. It was said that he was a person who killed people without blinking an eye. The people who had formed a circle to watch the show subconsciously squeezed back. It was not a good thing to be too close to this guy. You are Nyo Yud, Senior Nyo? Blue Maple's earlier arrogance had completely vanished, and he didn't dare to make the first move like he did earlier. Even though he had been beaten, his tone became a little more respectful. At this moment, what he was most worried about was whether Nyo Yud would still make a move. Sigh. Yu Qiancho waved his hand dismissively and said, "Compared to your blue palace, this little bit of fame is not worth mentioning." Someone in the crowd snickered. What did he mean by saying that a little fame was not worth mentioning in front of the blue palace? You dared to beat up someone from the blue palace in front of everyone, and you still said it so modestly? Even the beautiful lady boss couldn't help but smile when she heard this. She stared at Yu Qiancho with interest. Guan Zhongkai, on the other hand, openly smiled. Pei Fong had always been a sworn enemy of Grandmaster Yin Baikong. However, the World Chamber of Commerce did business with the people of the world, and their reputation was their priority. It was not good to find fault with them in cornucopia. Now that Nyo Yud had made a move, it couldn't be any better. This guy was famous for being reckless. Others might be afraid of Fatty Pei, but he probably wouldn't be afraid. The truth had already been proven. The World Chamber of Commerce's law enforcement guards quickly swept over from the street. Guan Zhongkai flashed out and blocked their way. No one knew what he said to them, but they looked at each other and smiled. They all stood on the rooftops to watch the show, deciding not to enforce the law for the time being. Blue Maple saw the crowd's mocking eyes and immediately blushed. He gritted his teeth and said, "Senior, you are a contemporary expert. Why are you deliberately making things difficult for me?" Fa. Yu Qiancho waved his hand disdainfully and said, "You already said that I am a contemporary expert. Do you think I would deliberately make things difficult for you?" The crowd snickered again. They found that Nyo Yud's words were a bit shameless. He really didn't have the demeanor of an expert. But when they thought about it, demeanor didn't seem to have anything to do with Nyo Yud. Then why did Senior hit me? Blue Maple's tone became a bit tougher. After all, it was under the watchful eyes of the public. If he continued to weaken the Blue Palace's reputation, he was afraid that he wouldn't end up well when he returned. Yu Qiancho said, "There's no other reason. I just couldn't help but want to slap you when I saw your cheap mouth. What do you have to say about that?" The crowd roared with laughter. Blue Maple immediately trembled with anger and said sternly, "Nyo Yud, don't go too far. Do you really think that the disciples of the Blue Palace are so easy to bully?" Yu Qiancho snorted coldly and said, "That's right. It's precisely because the disciples of the Blue Palace are not easy to bully that the female loose cultivators in the cultivation world suffer when they meet you. How dare you say that you're giving them face by playing with them in public? You're really shameless. You're a disgrace to all men. Damn it. If you want to play with them, then so be it. No one can control you. Why do you have to make it sound so disgusting and even show off? If I don't slap you, I can't eat or sleep well. I came here because I heard about your reputation. I want to see how easy it is to bully the disciples of the Blue Palace." His words. The group of women in the Sleeping Spring House were all heaving up and down. They seemed to be a little excited. The graceful lady boss stared at him silently, unblinking. You really want to openly provoke the Blue Palace?" Blue Maple had no choice but to use the name of the Blue Palace to pressure him again, hoping that the other party would back down. Yu Qiancho smiled faintly and turned to stare at Amano and the others. He said, "Amano." "Amano greets Senior Nyo." Amano hurriedly came over and bowed. He seemed a little excited. He didn't expect such a person to remember his name. The other two also hurriedly came over and bowed. There was a soft murmur in the surroundings. From the way Nyoyud addressed them, it seemed that he knew these three people. The beautiful lady boss's eyes dimmed slightly. She thought that Nyoyud was standing up for the female cultivator who had been humiliated, but it turned out that he was doing it for these three people. The woman in pink next to her was the heroine of this matter. Her eyes lit up. It seemed that she didn't expect the three of them to know someone like Nyoyud. The expression on her face kept changing. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and said, "I didn't expect to see the three of you here after we parted ways at the Ghost Manor. It seems that we're really fated." "Yes." The three of them bowed. They were so excited that they didn't know what to say. "Amano, I heard you say that you want to kill the disciples of the Blue Palace. Did I hear you correctly?" Yu Qianqiu said as he looked at Blue Maple. Blue Maple's expression changed. He felt that something was wrong. The people around them looked at each other in dismay. They could tell what was going on in his words. "Yes," Amano replied, but he seemed a little uneasy. "All right, I'll give you a chance." Yu Qianqiu raised his chin at Blue Maple and said, "The three of you go and kill him." Blue Maple was shocked and said sternly, "Nyoyud, you're openly going against the Blue Palace. My ancestor won't let you go." Then he shouted at Amano and the other two, "How dare you?" Amano and the other two hesitated. They didn't have the guts to kill the disciples of the Blue Palace. Unless they wanted to die in the future, that would be more likely. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the three of them and said indifferently, "Where's the courage to cause trouble in the World Chamber of Commerce? I don't accept cowards as my subordinates." As soon as he said this, the crowd was in an uproar. Many people looked at Amano and the other two enviously. What he meant was that if they killed Blue Maple, they would be his subordinates in the future. The three of them weren't fools. They naturally understood what he meant. As itinerant cultivators, they knew how rare this opportunity was. Even if they had to risk their lives, it would be worth it. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing of Ghost Manor were so glorious after they followed Nyoyud. They could order all the experts in the final stage of the Tribulation stage around the world around, which made many itinerant cultivators envious. Something that could only be imagined in their dreams actually happened to them. The three of them looked at each other. They were in high spirits as if they had been injected with chicken blood. If they didn't take this chance, they would be letting themselves down. So they nodded at each other. With flying swords in hand, they dashed forward and immediately surrounded Blue Maple in a triangular formation. "Try and touch me if you dare," Blue Maple threatened. A blue saber appeared in his hand again. He looked around as if he didn't want to fight and wanted to escape. "Kid, I'm here. If you dare to escape, I promise you'll die a horrible death." Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, "If you can defeat the three of them, I'll spare your life. If you dare to escape, I'll kill you immediately." Blue Maple's face turned pale. He immediately dismissed the idea of escaping because he didn't have the slightest confidence that he could escape from such a terrifying expert like Nyoyud. As his eyes drifted, he suddenly stopped and saw Guan Zhongkai in the crowd. He immediately said loudly, "Senior Guan, our Blue Palace does business in Cornucopia and has paid all the taxes. We should enjoy the protection of the World Chamber of Commerce. Is the World Chamber of Commerce really going to turn a blind eye to it? Where is the credibility of the World Chamber of Commerce?" This accusation was too big. Guan Zhongkai's expression changed and he waved to the roof. The law enforcement guards flashed to the middle and surrounded Blue Maple. The latter was slightly relieved. He wasn't afraid of Tianyi and the other two, but Nyoyud. The other side was clearly determined to kill him. If such an expert played any tricks during the fight, he probably wouldn't even know how he died. At this moment, 5 or 6 people in blue clothes appeared out of nowhere and flashed to the scene. They also protected Blue Maple. Blue Maple glanced at them and silently gritted his teeth. He couldn't say anything at this time. But he was well aware that these fellow disciples had been nearby just now. They probably didn't dare to come out when they saw Nyoyud looking for trouble with the Blue Palace. Now that the World Chamber of Commerce's people had stepped forward, they appeared one by one. Chapter 594. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the group from Blue Palace with some disdain. But to the surrounding cultivators, this wasn't a big deal. Avoiding the strong and avoiding the weak was the most basic survival rule in the cultivation world. If they didn't even know how to avoid an expert like Niu Yud and wanted to fight head-on, then everyone would laugh at them for overestimating themselves. Guan Zhongkai walked into the field with a bitter expression and cupped his hands towards Yu Qianzhou. Senior, please calm down. This is the headquarters of the World Commerce Association after all, and no one is allowed to cause trouble here. Senior, please let them go for the time being on account of my grandmaster. I will give Yin Baikong an explanation. Besides, Yu Qianzhou's eyes turned cold as he swept his gaze across the field and finally landed on Lu Maple's face. He said indifferently, "It's not that the World Commerce Association didn't do their duty, but I stopped them." Lu Maple was shocked. He didn't think that the other party wouldn't even give face to the World Commerce Association. From his tone, he still wanted to kill him. Since that was the case, he had to escape even if he didn't want to. Without another word, he flew up in a flash. Who knew that he would run into a ball of cold air after flying up a few meters? Apart from the bone-piercing chill, there were also all kinds of extreme negative emotions that could frighten one's soul. They easily broke through his stubborn will and directly and intensely crashed into his sea of consciousness. His consciousness sank into a coma in despair. His body stiffened and he fell uncontrollably. Under everyone's gaze, Lu Maple had just flown up when his eyes rolled back and his limbs fell stiffly to the ground with a plop. No one knew what had happened to him. He looked at Niu Yud again and felt his hair stand on end. He didn't even know how he had done it. His cultivation was indeed ridiculously high. You had a chance to live but you didn't want it. I told you not to run in front of me, but you didn't believe me. Yu Qianzhou said indifferently as he stared at Lu Maple on the ground. Actually, his cultivation was about the same as Lu Maple's, but he had expected Lu Maple to run. After all, struggling before death was human instinct. So he had secretly placed a black flame aura on Lu Maple's head in advance just in case. Since his cultivation had reached the tribulation stage, it was not difficult for him to do something like this in a short distance. Unless there was someone with an extremely high cultivation at the scene, under his deliberate suppression, it would be very difficult for an ordinary expert to discover it unless they were personally present. This was because it wasn't something that could be seen just by looking at it. But so what if someone found out? It didn't mean anything. On the other hand, it would be embarrassing if he couldn't make Blue Maple stay. Several Blue Palace disciples were shocked and surrounded Blue Maple. The leader said sternly, "Guan Zhongkai, is this the reputation that your World Chamber of Commerce boasts?" The World Commerce's law enforcement guards all looked at each other in dismay, not knowing what to do. In reality, everyone knew that no matter what rules were, in the face of power, they were worthless. Rules would always restrict the majority of ordinary people. For those at the top, there was no restriction at all. Guan Zhongkai said with a bitter face, "Senior, don't make things difficult for our world commerce. I've said it before, it's not that your world commerce isn't doing its duty, it's that I've stopped you." Yu Qianzhou spread his arms and a majestic and terrifying aura quickly surged in all directions. Although everyone present was in broad daylight, they felt as if they had fallen into the netherworld. Each and every one of them was on the verge of collapse. Yu Qianzhou wanted to establish his might now. How could he just sit back and do nothing? If he didn't show some ability, how would he have the qualifications to negotiate with an expert like Yin Baikong? Everyone thought that Yan Zhuixing was lying about the matter. Perhaps Yin Baikong was sharpening his blade right now. So he had to make the other party have some misgivings, or at least make the other party think that they were on the same level. That way, both sides would have the patience to talk properly. Otherwise, if an expert like Yin Baikong were to personally test the waters, it would be guaranteed that there would be one funnel after another, unable to hide from the other party's discerning eyes. At that time, no matter how extravagant your words were, it would all be fake. Strength was the most frightening thing. I believe that Yin Baikong will know everything that happened here. Yu Qianzhou raised his head and looked towards the God of Wealth Peak. At the peak of the God of Wealth Peak, there was a pine tree with a long blue stone platform beside it. A cultivator was lying on it, unconscious. He was the expert who was injured by Yu Qianzhou in the passage, one of Yin Baikong's disciples. "Niu Yud, you don't even put me in your eyes. You actually dared to injure this old man's disciple in the treasure bowl," Yin Baikong said hatefully. Even cool breeze and drifting cloud couldn't remove the haze on his face. Sikongju said, "According to the disciple who was carried here, it was junior brother who provoked Niu Yud first, but he couldn't withstand Niu Yud's aura, that's why. Yin Baikong was slightly startled. He asked in confusion. How could he not know that Niu Yud's cultivation is higher than his, and still provoked him first? Ju said with a guilty conscience. Junior brother's 3 disciples all died in the pursuit of Yen Xueqi. That's why he didn't show any mercy to Niu Yud. As he said this, Yin Baikong glared at him fiercely. Yin Baikong pressed one hand on the unconscious disciple's chest, and after checking the injury, he frowned. He then spread his fingers, and a white mist enveloped the disciple on the blue stone platform. Soon after, a faint gray mist slowly rose from the disciple's body, and gradually formed a thick gray ball in his palm. The white mist disappeared, and Yin Baikong held the gray ball in his palm to examine it. He squinted his eyes and said, "It's actually death chi. This is obviously something that only dead people have. Someone actually emitted an aura of death chi. This is really unheard of. Looks like this Niu Yud is being lenient. Once the life force in his body is completely taken over by the death chi, his life will be gone." With a wave of his hand, the gray ball flew far away, turning into a puff of smoke. Not long after, the cultivator on the blue stone platform slowly woke up. Seeing Yin Baikong standing at the side, he struggled to prop himself up and weakly said, "Master, senior brother." Just as Ju supported him, he saw a person flashing down the mountain. The person nodded to Ju, then immediately bowed to Yin Baikong and said, "Master, Yu Qianchou is outside the sleeping spring loft, and had a conflict with the people of Blue Palace. From the looks of it, it's very likely that he wants to kill the people of Blue Palace." The person roughly explained the situation, and Yin Baikong and Ju were stunned. The former then waved his hand and said, "Got it, first help your junior brother to rest." After the two left the mountain, Yin Baikong stroked his beard and said in a low voice, "Could it be that this Niu Yud really has such strength, that he doesn't even care about Fatty Pei who is at the late soul formation stage?" In his heart, he also weighed his own strength, and now he was a little worried about the consequences of inviting this Niu Yud. If it was easier to invite a god than to send him away, then it would be terrible. Regarding Yen Xueqi, he had already temporarily put aside the matter. At this time, the surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped a little. Almost at the same time, the master and disciple turned their heads to look down the mountain, and released their divine sense to investigate. They immediately discovered that the deeper their divine sense went, the lower the temperature became. Not only the temperature, but they also felt an indescribable aura that made one's heart palpitate. Yin Baikong was immediately overwhelmed with shock. Ju didn't dare to extend his divine sense too far, as it was a little unbearable. He withdrew his divine sense and nodded. "It's Niu Yud, I've experienced it before. This is the aura emitted from Niu Yud's body." Needless to say, Yin Baikong had already guessed that this terrifying aura came from the direction of the sleeping spring loft. However, what made him shocked was that the closer his divine sense got, the more uncomfortable it became. Even with his cultivation, he couldn't get too close, so he had no choice but to withdraw his divine sense. Heavens! Could it be that this Niu Yud's cultivation was actually higher than his? Yin Baikong took a deep breath, and decisively said, "Let's go down the mountain, I'll personally welcome him." "It's just a mere Niu Yud. This disciple will go welcome him." "Why would Master personally go down the mountain to welcome him?" Ju said. Actually, he had more or less guessed the reason, but he still had to say respectful words. Because he had guessed it, he was even more shocked by this Niu Yud's cultivation. With his cultivation, there's no need to make such a big commotion to take care of a few small shrimps. He did this to make me think it over. It's not good to put on airs, or else it'll be hard to talk when we meet. Let's go. Yin Baikong helplessly shook his head. Previously, he did want to put on airs as one of the top 10 experts, and more or less wanted to tame this spirit-severing expert for his own use. However, from the looks of it now, the other party's cultivation was probably higher than his. At that time, he didn't know who would put on airs. Provoking this great god, he didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse. Yu Qianchou's gaze moved away from the god of wealth peak, and the corner of his mouth curled into a smile. Within the range of the aura, he could sense it with his perception. He could even sense the two probing divine senses. One strong and one weak. Not mentioning the weak one, he had already fought with the strong one, and the final result was that the other party retreated. That person was most likely Yin Baikong. Humph. Even my world's #1 experts master was apprehensive of the netherworld ghost flame. How could you resist it? Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly swept his eyes around, but he was secretly happy in his heart. Although the ghost flame he had condensed earlier was not a match for the ghost flame, the concentrated power was not much weaker than the ghost flame. Baikong was only relying on his divine sense to resist, but he was actually at a disadvantage. The ghost flame's restraint on divine sense was quite tyrannical. How could he not be defeated? What are you three waiting for? The people are already lying on the ground. Don't tell me you still don't dare to make a move? Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted. Tian Yi and the other two were looking around blankly, because they suddenly discovered that the people around them were on the verge of collapse, and some had already collapsed on the ground. But the strange thing was, only the three of them were completely fine. Although they also felt that their surroundings were shrouded by a cold and terrifying aura, it didn't affect them too much. Why were those with higher cultivation than them unable to resist? Hearing Niu Yude's cold snort, the three of them were shocked, and immediately understood that it was Senior Niu's divine ability. Without hesitation, 3 cold lights flashed out, and in an instant, Lu Feng's body on the ground was divided up. Blood splattered everywhere, and dark red flowed on the street. There was no one around to stop them, and Lu Feng didn't resist at all, so they easily succeeded. The three of them kept their flying swords, and looked at each other in silence. Then, they all looked at Yu Qianqiu, and there was a hint of worry in their eyes. From today onwards, they were Niu Yude's people. If Niu Yude left them alone, then they would definitely meet a tragic end, and the Blue Palace would definitely not let them off. Chapter 595. Yu Qianqiu opened his arms slightly, and a terrifying aura flowed into his body like a tide. The surrounding temperature slowly returned to normal, and the people who had fallen to the ground slowly regained their senses. One by one, they let out a weak moan, looking a little weak. Yu Landou and Guan Zhongkai's cultivation were relatively high. Although their faces were a little pale, it was not a big deal. After all, the death aura that invaded everyone's body had been absorbed by Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu didn't want to make things too big at the moment. Otherwise, these people present would be in trouble. Even so, everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu with fear in their eyes. Those who could still move dispersed one after another. They had no interest in watching the show. If they had known that they would encounter such a thing, no one would have come to join in the fun. Guan Zhongkai was the most depressed. No one here was more unlucky than him. This was the 3rd time he had experienced this terrifying torture. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was torture. After the terrifying aura invaded his body, it constantly dispelled the vitality in his body. His whole person seemed to have become a walking corpse, and his weak consciousness could not control his body at all. It felt like he was struggling on the edge of death. Every second of suffering was worse than a day that felt like a year, and it was extremely uncomfortable. Yu Landou, who had been messed with twice as soon as she came to cornucopia, also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The two of them looked at each other and looked back and forth. They found that the lively street had been cleared, and most of the people were hiding somewhere. From time to time, people poked their heads out of the shops on both sides of the street to check. Several disciples of Blue Palace looked at Blue Maple's dismembered body on the ground with complicated expressions. They didn't dare to do anything to Niu Yude, and they didn't even dare to say harsh words. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, glanced at them and said indifferently, "Disciples of the Blue Palace, listen up. Go back and tell Fatty Pei that I, Niu Yude, killed him. If he has any complaints, let him come at me." Guan Zhongkai and Yu Landou exchanged glances. This Niu Yude was really not afraid of Pei Fong. The whole street, whether it was the people present or those hiding in the dark, had no doubt that Niu Yude was at the same level as the top 10 experts. From today onwards, the 3 of you are my subordinates. If there's any trouble, just mention my name, Niu Yude. Let's go. After Yu Qianqiu finished speaking to Amano and the other 2, he turned and left. Amano and the other 2 followed behind excitedly. They felt as though they had ascended to the heavens in a single bound. Happiness had come too suddenly. Even walking felt light. Many people in the shops on both sides of the street poked their heads out and memorized the faces of Amano and the other 2. People like the ruthless magistrate Niu Yude must remember this clearly. In the future, don't make a mistake and cause trouble that can't be resolved. Even Guan Zhongkai and Yu Lan were looking at Amano and the other two enviously. The two of them also turned around and followed him. Amano, wait up! A woman's voice came from behind. They all turned around and saw that it was the woman who had gotten into an argument with Amano. It was walking slowly towards them. It was obvious that it was affected by what had just happened, and it was difficult for it to move. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "What's the relationship between you and this woman?" Amano hung his head in pain. A man with a short beard beside him cupped his fists and said, "Senior, her name is Li Qiuxiang. She used to be our big brother's dual cultivation partner. She was later spotted by a disciple of the Blue Palace and left with him. Recently, we heard that she was making a living in the cornucopia of Spring Slumber. At first, we didn't believe it, so we hurried over to verify it. We didn't expect it to be her. Big Brother wanted to take her away, but she refused. Senior, you've seen everything that happened after that." Yu Qianqiu said, "I only know Amano's name, but I don't know your names." The man with a short beard bowed and said, "Highway." The man who seemed somewhat quiet replied, "Young Lord Mo." Qianqiu looked at the three of them and nodded slightly. "Amano, Highway, young Lord Amo. I'll remember it." He wasn't the only one. Guan Zhongkai, Yu Lan Du, and the people in the shops on both sides of the street all silently remembered these three names. What a joke! The subordinates of an expert like Niu You'd naturally had to be remembered. "Greetings. Senior Niu." Li Qiuxiang, who was dressed in a pink gauze and had a pretty face, bowed to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu looked at her without batting an eyelid. He didn't know what she wanted. He didn't like women in this line of work, but he didn't hate them either. He had always treated them normally. After all, no woman was born into this line of work. Most of them were forced by life. Of course, Yu Qianqiu had never been too fond of those who did this line of work because they liked ease and hated hard work. Li Qiuxiang turned to look at Amano and said, "Amano, you said you would take me away. Do you still mean what you said?" Amano suddenly looked up and widened his eyes. He said with some excitement, "Qiuxiang, are you really willing to go with me?" "I'll go with you." Li Qiuxiang nodded seriously. Amano grabbed her hand and nodded repeatedly. "Okay, I'll take you away. We'll never be separated again." Even though there weren't many people on the street, whispers could be heard coming from the shops on both sides of the street. Guan Zhongkai and Yu Lan looked at each other. This woman really knew how to pick the right time. Before, she couldn't even snatch him away. After Amano followed Niu Yud, she immediately went back on her words. Even though this was normal in the cultivation world, she didn't even try to hide it. The group of girls under Sleeping Spring looked at Li Qiuxiang enviously. They envied her for suddenly flying up the tree branch and climbing up the high branch in the blink of an eye. From now on, she wouldn't have to live a life where everyone could bully and humiliate her. In the future, she might even become a famous figure in the cultivation world. Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun were quietly sizing up the shocked Niu Yud. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and said, "Wait." Then he asked Li Qiuxiang, "Didn't you say that you and Amano have nothing to do with each other? Why do you want to go with him now?" "Senior is wise." Li Qiuxiang bowed and said, "In the cultivation world, the weak are prey to the strong. Junior is just a weak girl who is bullied everywhere and longs for someone to protect her. The Amano in the past couldn't even protect himself, so how could he protect me? Junior doesn't have a sense of security if I follow him. Instead, I will become a burden to him. But now, it's different. Amano has Senior's protection, so how many people in the world dare to touch him? This is what Junior is pursuing. Now that I have this opportunity, even if others call me a shameless whore who can be ridden by thousands of men, I will still have to be thick-skinned and give it a try." The group of women under Sleeping Spring all felt sad when they heard this. Yu Qianqiu's expression froze. He shook his head and said, "You are really direct. You don't beat around the bush at all. Riding on a sword to traverse the world, white bones fly like a mountain bird. The world is like a tide and people are like water. How many people in the pugilistic world return? For Senior to be able to write such a poem, I know that Senior is an expert who has seen through the world of mortals. No matter what lies I say in front of Senior, it will be hard to escape Senior's discerning eyes. Why should Junior knowingly violate the law?" Li Qiuxiang bowed again and said, "Junior's life has not been easy. I regret that I should not have stepped into the cultivation world. If I had known this would happen, I would have become an ordinary mortal's wife. But when I look back, the tree longs for peace, the wind never ceases. I beg Senior to fulfill my wish. This flattery made Yu Qianqiu feel comfortable. Moreover, her words were polite and well-mannered, so he couldn't help but look at her in a different light. Yu Qianqiu was very surprised and looked at her seriously. Helplessness piled up on his face. The wisdom in his eyes was faintly discernible, but most of the time, it was covered by the vicissitudes and numbness. Looking at Tianye's pleading eyes again, Yu Qianqiu paused. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes and snorted coldly. Li Qiuxiang, although you said you want to follow Tianyi, you actually want to follow me. But don't you think about what you did in the sleeping spring brothel? No matter what you say, do you think I will keep a woman like you by my side? Li Qiuxiang's face immediately turned pale when he said these harsh words. The group of women in the sleeping spring brothel were all dejected. What was the difference between him and them? He had smashed the little dreams they had in their hearts. That beautiful lady boss bit her lips with her silver teeth as she stared at Yu Qianqiu. Senior! Tianyi was almost begging. Yu Qianqiu stared at him coldly, and the surrounding air became cold again. Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun quickly pulled him back, indicating that he should not anger the senior. Tianyi, you know what kind of filthy business she's doing now. Don't you care at all? Yu Qianqiu turned to Li Qiuxiang and said, Li Qiuxiang, one must know one's limits. Like you said, you're already a whore that thousands of men ride on. Tianyi might have accepted you in a moment of impulse, but do you really think he can take the mockery of others in the future? Can he endure the torment day after day, year after year? Aren't you afraid that he'll be like the Blue Palace disciples and dump you again? How many times do you want to be dumped by a man in this life? Every word was like a gem. Li Qiuxiang's face was pale. She looked at Tianyi in a daze and asked with a trembling voice, Do you care? You will. Tianyi covered her mouth and shook his head. I only care about you. You should know that. Hee hee. What a joke. Yu Qianqiu said sarcastically, Tianyi, even if you don't care, ask her. If one day, I Niu Yud am gone, and you, Tianyi, are without my protection. Humph. If she meets the disciple of Bai Chongqun, the world's #1 expert, who's even more powerful than the Blue Palace disciples, will she abandon you again? She's already said that what she needs is a sense of security, not you. Tianyi, think carefully. The man and the woman looked at each other in a daze. They were provoked by Yu Qianqiu's words one after another. It was as if he had crushed their hearts, rubbed them, and trampled on them again. The two of them were so disheartened that they even wanted to die. How cruel! Even Guan Zhongkai and Yu Landou, the two old foxes, felt that it was too much. They looked at each other and shook their heads. They thought to themselves, if you can't stand it, just kill him. You're an expert. Do you really have to do this? You said that Lan Feng's mouth is cheap, but your mouth is even worse than Lan Feng's. Will you? Tianyi asked with difficulty in a hoarse voice. Will I? Li Qiuxiang murmured to herself in a daze. She seemed to have thought of something. After a long time, her eyes regained clarity, but a pitiful smile appeared on her face. She broke free from Tianye's hand. Tianyi shook his head slowly. He looked at Li Qiuxiang with despair in his eyes. Suddenly, his eyes widened. He saw Li Qiuxiang's hands forming claws and clawing at his own face. Under her ferocious fingers, deep bloody marks appeared. His skin and flesh were torn open, revealing his bones. Blood flowed down his chest. Chapter 596. She was a beautiful woman with a beautiful face. In the blink of an eye, her beautiful face became a bloody mess. The white bones that were exposed were even more frightening. How could one see her original face clearly? For such a beautiful woman to do such a vicious thing to her own face, how much determination did she have to make to do so? Everyone was stunned. The heads that stuck out from the shop could not shrink back in. They all looked at this scene in disbelief. There was such a crazy woman. Sister-in-law. Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun cried out in unison. When the stunned Amano came to his senses, he let out a tragic cry. No! She grabbed the hands that were still scratching her face and asked, Why did you do this? Why did you do this? She was already sobbing. Li Qiuxiang raised that face that had become abnormally terrifying. Blood continuously flowed, and the front of her body was dyed red with blood. He chuckled and said, "Amano, do you believe me? I believe, I always believed. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have hesitated just now." Tianyi wailed and stomped his feet. "No, it's not your fault." Li Qiuxiang shook her bloody face and said, "Senior is right. If there is someone to blame, it's me. Looking for a sense of security is just an excuse. It's my own weak mind. I've always wanted to climb up the social ladder. I deserve this. Don't say any more. Hurry up and stop the bleeding." Tianyi wanted to raise his hand to cover her bleeding face, but her face was too badly scratched. He did not know where to start. Li Qiuxiang shook her head again and smiled. "It's better if my blood flows clean. I want to be a new person." Unfortunately, her face was too horrifying. No one could tell that she was smiling. Sister Qiuxiang. Below spring slumber, a woman who was probably on good terms with Li Qiuxiang wanted to rush over but was held back by the lady boss. The lady boss said with tears in her eyes, "Let her. This is her chance. Don't disturb her." The group of women all started sobbing. "Highway, Xiaojun, hurry up and help me. Help her stop the bleeding." Tianyi was flustered. He did not know where to start. Highway and Mo Xiaojun hurriedly took out some things from their storage bags, and the three men squatted there and got busy. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at the culprit at the same time, only to see Niu Yud standing there coldly without any expression on his face. The two of them were speechless. People really couldn't be compared with each other. By the time the three men were done, Li Qiuxiang's entire face was almost completely covered. Yu Qianchou snorted coldly. He turned around and said, "Guan Zhongkai, let's go, your Grandmaster Yin Baikong is still waiting for me." Guan Zhongkai and Yu Lan secretly looked at Li Qiuxiang, then followed behind Yu Qianchou without another word. As the three of them walked forward, all the heads in the shop that had been shaken once again shrunk back. "Senior!" Amano ran over and stopped in front of Yu Qianchou. He knelt down and begged, "Senior, please let me bring her along. She has repented." "Whether she repented or not, what does that have to do with me? Either you go with her, or you go with me. Choose one of the two. Do as you see fit. Don't block my way. Get out of my way." Yu Qianchou kicked Amano to the side of the street. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Guan Zhongkai and Yulan suddenly realized that it was a little embarrassing to follow behind Niu Yud. They scratched their faces in unison and looked at each other blankly. Yu Qianchou walked a few steps, then suddenly turned around and said, "What about the two of you? Are you going with the two of them, or me? There's only one chance. I don't have the patience to ask again." He was asking Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun. A bunch of heads popped out from the shop again, all staring at Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun, waiting to see what they would do. Would they go with the two of them, or with Niu Yud? However, everyone guessed that the two of them would choose the latter. This was definitely an opportunity that could only be encountered by chance. Niu Yud, who had the strength to rival the top 10 experts. Who could resist such a temptation? It was a great temptation. As the two of them, they had experienced it firsthand and were struggling in their hearts. On one hand, they were good brothers who had been together for many years. On the other hand, they had the opportunity to change their lives. It was indeed difficult to decide which way to go. Amano quietly climbed up from the side of the street and walked to the two of them. He smiled bitterly and patted their shoulders heavily, saying, "Go! Go with Senior Niu. This is a rare opportunity. Make good use of it." "Big brother." Hai Wei pressed the hand on his shoulder. Mo Xiaojun smiled and asked, "Big brother, what about you?" Amano looked at Li Qiuxiang, who was standing alone, and smiled warmly. Some people can't miss a second chance after they've missed it once. You two follow Senior Niu well. Take care. After saying that, he pushed the two of them away and walked resolutely towards Li Qiuxiang. The two of them looked at each other and suddenly nodded heavily at each other. They bowed deeply to Yu Qianchou, then turned around and shouted, "Big brother!" and strode away without looking back. The crowd was in an uproar. The two of them were clearly giving up the opportunity to follow Niu Yud. Everyone was somewhat impressed, but they also felt that it was foolish to do so. After killing Blue Maple, The three of them had no way out. Without Niu Yud's protection, they might not even live to see tomorrow. Yu Qianchou silently turned around and squinted at the three of them. Guan Zhongkai and Yu Lan shook their heads slightly. This Niu Yud had a bad temper. Daring to disrespect him like this, the three of them were probably going to suffer. Amano turned around, his expression unusually agitated, but he reprimanded, "What are you doing? Go back, go back." Hai Wei laughed heartily. "Big brother, don't try to persuade me. We've been brothers for so many years, and we've come out of bloodshed together. If we suddenly break up, I won't be used to it." Mo Xiaojun nodded. "That's right. Big brother doesn't want to miss sister-in-law again, but the two of us don't want to miss you, big brother, even once. Otherwise, we'll regret it for the rest of our lives. Aren't you stupid? If you follow me, Blue Palace won't let you go." Amano laughed and scolded with tears in his eyes. Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun looked at each other and laughed. Hai Wei said heartily, "We'll talk about the future in the future. At most, we'll just die. Besides, it's not certain. The three of us have been able to survive in the cultivation world back to back until now. Our lives have always been tough." Li Qiuxiang, whose face was covered with a white cloth, suddenly burst into tears. The three of them were surprised when they heard her shout, "Go! Go! I don't want you to care about me. I'm not worth it. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore." The three of them walked over silently. Amano put his arm around her shoulders and chuckled, "Stop talking nonsense. Let's go." They had only taken a few steps when Li Qiuxiang suddenly broke free and rushed to a place a few meters away from Yu Qianchou. She knelt down and kowtowed repeatedly. "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have stained Senior's eyes. I'll bear all the blame alone. It has nothing to do with them. Senior, just pretend that you've never seen me." As soon as she finished speaking, a flying sword flashed out of the storage bag on her waist that was stained with blood. Li Qiuxiang grabbed the flying sword and swiftly slid it across her neck. She was very decisive. "No!" Amano and the other two shouted in despair. It was too late to save her even if they wanted to. The women below Spring Slumber cried out in alarm. "Humph!" Yu Qianchou snorted coldly and waved his hand. When the sword in Li Qiuxiang's hand was about to touch her neck, it suddenly shattered into a cloud of silver powder that drifted away. This scene made everyone suck in a cold breath. From a few meters away, with a wave of his hand, the flying sword was shattered into powder without any sound. If this trick was used on a human, what would the consequences be? Killing without a sound or a trace. Unbeknownst to them, this trick of Yu Qianchou had no effect on a human. Amano and the other two quickly rushed over. Li Qiuxiang simply wouldn't stop until she was dead. After a slight pause, she bounced up and slammed her head into a tree by the roadside a few meters away. When Amano and the other two reached out, they almost touched the corner of her clothes, but they still missed and didn't manage to catch her. Amano kicked the ground and dodged to the side. He reached out to grab her again. His cultivation level was much higher than Li Qiuxiang's. Although he was a little slower, he still managed to catch her. "TSS!" The corner of her clothes that he grabbed was directly torn apart. Li Qiuxiang had already made up her mind to die. She used a lot of strength and managed to grab her clothes but didn't manage to stop her. She still crashed straight into the tree. Damn it! Yu Qianchou was really speechless. He quickly hit the tree with his palm. Just as Li Qiuxiang was about to crash into the tree, thick white smoke suddenly burst out from the tree. Li Qiuxiang's figure disappeared into the smoke. In the blink of an eye, she emerged from the other side and fell into the shop opposite. The thick white smoke was like white silk, shooting towards Yu Qianchou at high speed, and all of it disappeared into his palm. Amano's mouth opened and closed. He didn't dare to hesitate anymore. He directly flashed into the shop and grabbed Li Qiuxiang's palm that was about to hit the top of his head. He injected his energy into her body and quickly controlled her. He shook her shoulder and shouted, "Why are you so stupid?" Everyone looked at Li Qiuxiang, who was covered in dust, and then looked at the tree outside. All of them were dumbfounded. They saw that the branches of the tree, from top to bottom, had all turned a deathly gray. The originally dark green leaves had also shriveled and lost their luster. And there was a hole in the tree. Obviously, it was left behind when Li Qiuxiang passed through it. Everyone stared dumbfoundedly. not knowing what was going on. In particular, the white smoke that Yu Qianchou had sent out with his palm strike was even more baffling. In the shop, Li Qiuxiang, who was being carried by Amano, muttered to herself, "I have no dignity when I live. Is it so hard to die with a little dignity? Why don't you let me die? If you want to have dignity, you can't exchange it with death." Yu Qianchou stood outside and said calmly, "I've saved you twice. This life of yours no longer belongs to you. It belongs to me. From today onwards, you are mine. Whether you live or die, it's not up to you." As soon as these words came out, gasps of surprise sounded everywhere. The meaning of Niu Yud's words couldn't be clearer. Li Qiuxiang's bitterness was over, and she had been accepted by this ruthless judge. Even though these words were a little roundabout, as long as one wasn't a fool, they could tell. Chapter 597. The ones who found it the most unbelievable were probably Tian Yi and the others. Li Qiuxiang stared at Yu Qianchou in a daze. Tian Yi, who came to his senses, shook Li Qiuxiang with wild joy and said, "Hurry up and thank Senior Niu. Hurry, hurry." He was so excited that he didn't know what to say. He directly pulled her out. Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun also followed in surprise. The 3 men and 1 woman knelt down side by side and kowtowed. Li Qiuxiang choked with sobs. She wanted to say thank you, but she couldn't. The women in the dormant spring building were crying, but no one knew whether they were crying for Li Qiuxiang or crying for their own tragic fate. "The 3 of you have decided to leave, so you have nothing to do with me anymore. Why are you still bowing to me?" Yu Qianchou stared at Tian Yi and the others and said indifferently. This sentence was no less than a lightning strike. The 4 of them froze there, not knowing what to do. The women in the dormant spring building all quieted down and looked over quietly. Guan Zhongkai and Yu Lan looked at each other. This Niu Yud was too good at tormenting people. The people in the shops on the street shook their heads and smiled bitterly. At first, the 3 of them left for this woman. Now that Niu Yud accepted this woman, he didn't accept the 3 of them. No matter what, they still couldn't be together. "Senior," Li Qiuxiang said with a trembling voice, "please give them another chance." However, Yu Qianchou slowly closed his eyes and ignored her. Tian Yi and the others looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Tian Yi slowly stood up and said to Li Qiuxiang, "The 3 of us have nothing to begin with, so we won't lose anything if we leave. However, since you have a way out, this trip is not in vain. Qiuxiang, this opportunity is hard to come by. Follow Senior well. Let's go." Tian Yi said to Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun helplessly. The 3 of them silently turned around and left. "No." Li Qiuxiang let out a heart-wrenching scream and kowtowed 3 times to Yu Qianchou. Without saying a word, she jumped up and blocked the 3 of them, saying, "Tian Yi, you can't leave me alone. If you want to leave, we'll leave together." As soon as these words came out, everyone present was moved. In order to have a good future, this woman had fallen to the point of selling her body. Now, she had disfigured herself and committed suicide, making her life incomparably tragic. She had finally found a good future, but for the sake of a man, she gave it up without hesitation. This kind of courage and temperament made a bunch of people with eyes of power and hearts of stone feel deep respect. Just based on this point, even if she had sold herself in a brothel, no one would look down on her now. "Sister-in-law!" Hai Wei couldn't help but shout. Mo Xiaojun laughed. "This trip is really worth it. I found a good sister-in-law." Amano excitedly grabbed Li Qiuxiang's hand and nodded. "Okay, let's go together." The 4 of them looked at each other and silently moved forward, enjoying the attention of everyone. The group of women in the dormant spring house, however, seemed to have received a rude awakening, and all of them were dumbfounded. In a trance, he seemed to have understood something. Was it worth it to go through so much suffering and even sell his body to pursue something? As a woman, who else could be happier than Li Qiuxiang? After Li Qiuxiang had died once, she had finally found what she truly wanted. The group of women, each and every one of them felt a sense of loss, crying silently, remembering the happiness that they had so easily given up. In the beginning, they wanted nothing more than to tear Niu Yud into pieces. Why was this person so cold-hearted, ravaging these people to the point that they hovered between life and death, wanting to break up a pair of mandarin ducks with a bitter fate? However, They could only keep their hatred in their hearts. If they wanted to take care of Niu Yud, even if they all attacked him together, they wouldn't have the ability. Now, they were envious of Li Qiuxiang. After Niu Yud let her die once, he helped her find her sense of self. Among the people present, who would look down on her because she had sold herself, everyone was certain that she and Amano would truly be together for the rest of their lives. After this ordeal of hovering between life and death, no matter how cruel the reality was in the future, he and she would never leave each other, and would never be separated again. Although Li Qiuxiang's face was disfigured, from today onwards, she had truly transcended the sea of bitterness. They were incomparably envious of Li Qiuxiang. They had the same fate, but different fortunes. Now, they were very much looking forward to meeting their fated Niu Yud. However, where was the Niu Yud who could save their fates? Suddenly, a cold snort came from the quiet street. Coming and going as you please, who do you think I, Niu Yud, am? It's over. These two words suddenly appeared in everyone's minds. With a swoosh, all eyes were focused on Niu Yud, who had his eyes slightly closed. Even Yulan secretly clicked her tongue, but Guan Zhongkai felt a nameless fire in his heart, and he couldn't help but glare at Niu Yud. He thought, "You've already tormented them to this extent. Don't tell me you still don't want to let them go? If you want to be a bad person, then be more direct. Don't beat around the bush, there's no one like you." The group of women in dormant spring instantly tensed up, looking at Niu Yud worriedly. Almost all of them were praying in their hearts, "Please spare them." The beautiful lady boss, who had experienced all kinds of things in the mortal world, suddenly had an epiphany, and there was no worry on her face. Instead, her bright eyes were glowing, and she looked at Niu Yud with a smile. Amano and the other three stiffened, unable to move anymore, and slowly turned around. They knew that with Niu Yud's miraculous means just now, even if they wanted to escape, they wouldn't be able to. If he wanted to kill them, it would be as easy as raising his hand. Where could they escape to? "Senior, can you let us go?" Amano smiled bitterly. Yu Qianchou slowly opened his eyes, staring at the four of them and said coldly, "The four of you have betrayed me once. I hope that the four of you will remember it. Although I, Niu Yud, have always won people over with my virtue, there can't be a second time. I hope that you will grasp this second chance well, and it will also be your last chance. If you dare to do it again, I guarantee that you won't even have the chance to regret. Let's go." Yu Qianchou threw a sentence at Guan Zhongkai and Yulan, who were beside him, and turned to leave. The two of them were still pondering the meaning in his words, and then they immediately came to a realization. The two of them looked at each other and smiled, then looked at Amano and the other three, and shook their heads. Before leaving, Guan Zhongkai waved at the four of them and said, "Why are the four of you still in a daze? Didn't you hear Senior Niu say that he has already given you a second chance? What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and catch up." After saying this, Guan Zhongkai suddenly felt a sense of relief in his heart, a very refreshing kind of relief. He was even more pleased than when his cultivation had increased by a level, and he didn't understand why. The two of them followed Niu Yud slowly forward, and they no longer felt embarrassed like before. Instead, they felt that they had gained face. What was the demeanor of an expert? The behavior of this awesome person in front of them was the demeanor of an expert. Happiness came too suddenly, and Amano and the other three were so excited that they didn't know what to say. Words could no longer describe their current feelings. "Don't make Senior Niu unhappy anymore. Hurry up and catch up." In the shop, a hot-blooded youth with an unknown name waved and shouted with all his might, "Hurry up and catch up. Hurry up and catch up." Everyone couldn't help but shout, and the cornucopia was filled with a passion that had never been seen before. An unforeseen legendary story was happening in front of everyone's eyes. It was filled with too much unpredictability, revisiting the forces in human nature, revisiting the common joys and sorrows in the cultivation world, revisiting the true nature that everyone had long forgotten. It was like a dream, full of ups and downs, twists and turns. In the midst of despair, everyone saw the ending that they had been anticipating. Everyone's emotions that had been suppressed for a long time couldn't help but burst out in this wave of shouting. Bang! In the midst of everyone's shouting, there was a sudden sound of collapse, and smoke and dust rose in all directions on the street, suppressing everyone's emotions that had yet to be completely vented. They saw that the tree that Li Qiuxiang had pierced through suddenly collapse, and in the blink of an eye, the tree turned into dust that filled the air, Everyone gasped again, and only now did they understand the meaning of Niu Yud's palm. It turned out that this tree had already been smashed into dust by Niu Yud's palm, and that was why Li Qiuxiang was fine when she rammed into it. Now the tree was still standing here, but it was just an illusion. In the end, after being shaken by everyone shouting, it collapsed on the spot. Everyone looked at Niu Yud, who was slowly moving forward, and his gait was so calm. His back was faintly discernible in the dust, and the more he showed the demeanor of an expert, the more mysterious he became. The group of women in Sleeping Spring Loft still had tears in their eyes, and they all stared at the back of that figure, their eyes full of admiration and respect. The graceful lady boss bit her lip with her pearly white teeth, and murmured with a smile, "Bad guy! Why did you have to make such a simple matter full of ups and downs, causing me to be vexed for so long?" Although she scolded like this, how could she not understand in her heart? If Niu Yud didn't do this, would Amano and Li Qiuxiang really last long? Not necessarily. Now that Li Qiuxiang had been forced to be reborn from the dead, and had been reborn, she could now be an upright person. He had already given Li Qiuxiang the dignity that she wanted to be a human, and the future would depend on Li Qiuxiang herself. Hidden under the cold and indifferent surface was his good intentions. Ruthless, decisive, resourceful, intelligent, and capable, this was a real man. The lady boss, who had experienced all kinds of situations in the world, secretly evaluated Niu Yud in her heart. Amano felt that his throat was a little dry, and a simple syllable jumped out of his mouth. "Let's go!" The four of them nodded excitedly, and didn't care that the dust would dirty their bodies. For figures flew up, passed through the pervasive smoke, and followed behind the three people in front. "Niu Yud, all of you get back here." A delicate shout suddenly rang out from the street. F***CK. Who had such guts? Everyone turned their heads to look, and the dust had already gradually dissipated. They saw the lady boss of Sleeping Spring Loft standing in the middle of the street, her hands on her voluptuous and graceful waist, like a shrew cursing in the street, staring at the people in front of her with her almond-shaped eyes. The crowd was in an uproar. Did she want to die? She actually called the ruthless magistrate Niu Yud by his name? What was going on today? Accidents kept happening one after another. The people in front of them were stunned, and they all turned around. Yu Qianqiu was even more baffled, and his face was full of astonishment. Guan Zhongkai shouted angrily, "Yan Yu, what are you trying to do? Are you tired of living?" Chapter 598. In the rear hall of the treasure-gathering hall at the foot of the God of Wealth Peak, Yin Baikong, clad in a black robe, stood upright with his eyes closed, silently listening to the movements in the distance. He could only hear the cheers from time to time, and at other times, it was so quiet that there was no sound at all. Yin Baikong frowned and opened his eyes. "Why aren't they here yet? What the hell is Niu Yud doing?" Standing at the side, Si Kongju, who looked even older than his master, said, "Master, why don't you go back first? I'll welcome him. How could a mere Niu Yud make you wait here for so long?" Yin Baikong was a little hesitant, but he saw a person excitedly rushing in from outside. The person nodded at Si Kongju and bowed to him. "Master, under Niu Yud's interference, the Blue Palace's disciple was killed. Niu Yud is now." The man reported everything that had happened so far in detail. Yin Baikong's face was full of smiles when he heard that a disciple of Blue Palace had been killed. He was imagining Fatty Pei's furious reaction when he heard the news. Suddenly, he heard that Niu Yud was entangled by a girl from a brothel. He could not help but be stunned. He chuckled and said, "Interesting. Come, let's go and take a look." "Spring Slumber Tower?" Si Kongju asked. Seeing his master nod his head, he immediately said anxiously, "Master, with your identity, how can you go to that kind of place?" Sigh. Yin Baikong raised his hand to stop him from speaking. He smiled happily and said, "Niu Yud's cultivation is probably not lower than mine. Even he is willing to throw away his face to tangle with them. What else do I have to worry about? I'll just watch the show." "But this will make it seem as if you are personally going to pay a visit to him." Si Kongju's words were once again interrupted. Yin Baikong shook his head and said, "What time is it now? You still care about that? Let's go and take a look." Since his master had already made his decision, it would not be good for him to stop him again and again, so he could only follow him out. However, How could the scene of Baikong showing his face here be small? No matter how low-key he was, more than 10 experts at the end of the Tribulation Transcendent stage immediately appeared to accompany him. Guan Zhongkai couldn't understand it. She was a smart woman who was used to seeing where the wind blew, but she was the only one who could take advantage of others. No one could take advantage of her. But today, he took the wrong medicine and rushed to die. Glancing at Li Qiuxiang, he felt a little depressed. Could it be that she was addicted to suicide today? The lady boss rolled her eyes at him. She was so alluring that the men in the shops on both sides of the street swallowed their saliva. However, everyone knew that this piece of fragrant meat was notoriously hard to get. They could only enjoy it with their eyes and let their imaginations run wild. She dared to play for real. Although she was a woman, she had a wide range of connections and was not someone ordinary people could afford to offend. Thus, all of them unscrupulously glanced at her curvaceous and graceful figure, their eyes filled with greed without any restraint. Guan Zhongkai was stunned when she rolled her eyes at him. He cursed in his heart, "Smelly woman, one day I'll get you on my bed and let you know how powerful I am." Although he was still scowling, he could no longer be stubborn. His imposing manner weakened as he shouted, "Yan Yu, what do you want?" So her name was Yan Yu. Most people who dared to do this kind of business had a wide range of connections. If there was a chance, he could make friends with them. It would be beneficial to him. Yu Qianqiu sized her up seriously. Previously, he had been maintaining the demeanor of an expert, so he hadn't looked her in the eye. Now that he saw her clearly, he couldn't help but praise her in his heart. She was indeed a rare beauty in the cultivation world. "I'll settle the score with him." Yan Yu pointed one of her slender fingers at Yu Qianqiu without hesitation. Everyone was in an uproar. This coquettish lady boss really didn't want to live anymore. They all shook their heads with some regret. It was a pity for this good body. They hoped that the ruthless judge, Niu Yud, would be merciful. Otherwise, the treasure bowl would lose a beautiful scenery that was pleasing to the eye. Guan Zhongkai glanced at the puzzled Yu Qianqiu and immediately shouted, "Senior Niu doesn't know you. What's there to settle the score with you? Don't mess around. If you anger Senior Niu, no one can protect you." Then he laughed at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Senior, don't bother with this crazy woman. She has always been crazy." He still wanted to try to protect her. After all, she was a piece of meat that he had never tasted before. It would be a pity to ruin it. However, with Niu Yud's strange temper, he could only give it a try. If it didn't work, he wouldn't come forward again. No matter how fragrant the meat was, it wasn't as important as his own life. Although this was the headquarters of the World Commerce Association, he was very sure that Niu Yud wouldn't have any misgivings when he attacked. He didn't want to be implicated. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand, indicating for him to shut up. Then he put his hands behind his back and slowly walked back with narrowed eyes. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and smiled bitterly. The group had no choice but to follow him back. Among them, Li Qiuxiang was a little nervous. She understood that although the lady boss was sometimes shrewish, she still took care of the sisters in the building. She more or less didn't want anything to happen to her. However, her own identity was awkward and it wasn't good for her to speak. Yan Yu watched as Yu Qianqiu coldly walked over. Her heart was thumping wildly. It would be a lie if she said she wasn't afraid, but she didn't want to miss this opportunity to get to know Niu Yud. Some men decided that as long as it was worth it, they would happily make their move. Otherwise, once they missed it, there wouldn't be another chance. Her heart was thumping wildly, but on the surface, she was shrewish and calm. The group of women in the dormant spring building turned pale, revealing timid expressions. They didn't know why the lady boss would provoke such a terrifying person. Yu Qianqiu walked over with his hands behind his back. He coldly stood in front of Yan Yu, and at the same time saw the flash of fear in the other's eyes. He snorted coldly and circled around Yan Yu, sizing up her figure without the slightest scruple. Yan Yu wanted to pretend to be calm, but she also felt her hair stand on end. She felt her body stiffen as she stood there. When he returned to face Yan Yu once more, Yu Qianqiu stretched out a hand, and his 2 fingers curled as he stroked her fair, tender and round chin. He said indifferently, "You want to settle the score with me? You're not afraid of me?" The surroundings were deathly silent. No one was breathing heavily as they watched this scene. It was hard for everyone to imagine what kind of scene it would be when such a beautiful woman suddenly splattered with blood. The atmosphere was very tense. "I've seen many men. Why would I be afraid of you?" she replied calmly, but her body remained motionless. Yu Qianqiu's 2 fingers slid down to her exposed shoulders. He gently caressed them and said, "You still say you're not afraid of me? I'm getting goosebumps." As soon as he finished speaking, he couldn't help but snicker. He cussed inwardly. Damn it! Facing such a beautiful woman, who pretended to be an expert, was a bastard. In any case, I won't pretend anymore. Niu Yud was laughing lewdly. Everyone was stunned. Yan Yu breathed a sigh of relief. She slapped away Yu Qianqiu's slap and said, "You're an expert. Don't be serious." She thought to herself, "It'd be strange if I wasn't scared. I'm about to pee my pants because of you." Yu Qianqiu's hand that had been slapped away went back to her soft waist. He chuckled and said, "Didn't you say you want to settle accounts with me? How?" He pointed at the dormant spring restaurant and said, "Shall we go to your room, get on your bed and strip naked? Then we can settle accounts." "Don't take advantage of me." Yan Yu's shoulders shook and her soft waist shook. She pushed Yu Qianqiu away and said, "It's to settle accounts." Clang! The sound of a door being knocked over came from one of the shops. Everyone's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They all thought they were seeing things. In the atmosphere of sharpening knives, the 2 of them suddenly turned into flirting. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? The tense atmosphere suddenly became ambiguous. It was hard for everyone to get used to it. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other. Everyone admired the lady boss's courage. She was indeed a beauty who had seen the world. Even Niu Yud raised his hands in surrender. Settle accounts? Yu Qianqiu looked at the signboard of the dormant spring restaurant in astonishment. He asked suspiciously, "We've never met before, right? It's also my first time coming to Cornucopia. When did I ever patronize your business or owe you money?" The 3 of them. Yan Yu Chong pointed at Amano and the other 2 and said, "The 3 of them came here to spend money, but they didn't pay a single cent. Now they want to run away after following you. If I don't ask you for money, who should I ask?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Amano and the other 2 were even more embarrassed. Guan Zhongkai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "Yan Yu, don't go too far. This is only a small amount of money. With Senior Niu's reputation, it's far more than this amount. You're usually a very shrewd person. What are you doing today?" "Master Guan, that's where you're wrong." Yan Yu waved her arm and pointed at the women downstairs. She said, "Us sisters don't have an easy life. We're in the flesh business, which is looked down upon by everyone. Of course, Master Guan naturally doesn't care about this small amount of money. But for us, it's money that we shamelessly exchanged with our dignity." Turning his head, he said to Yu Qianqiu, "It's true that you, Senior Niu, are an expert of the present age. But do you have the nerve to shortchange us brothers and sisters, who shed blood and tears and sold our dignity in exchange for a little bit of money?" His words almost made Yu Qianqiu feel ashamed. Yan Yu turned her head and said to Guan Zhongkai, "Master Guan, my sleeping spring loft has always paid taxes in full and on time. We've never been late. It stands to reason that we should enjoy the protection of your World Chamber of Commerce and help us collect our debts from our creditors. How can you be like this? You're the first to break the rules. How can we do business in the future?" You. Guan Zhongkai was speechless at her big accusation. At this moment someone suddenly shouted, "Well said. From today onwards, Sleeping Spring Loft's business in Cornucopia will no longer collect any taxes. It's tax-free." The voice rolled and echoed throughout the whole street with great momentum. It was easy to imagine the background of someone who dared to speak so arrogantly in Cornucopia. Guan Zhongkai's expression changed greatly. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and his pupils shrank. A few dozen people walked over from the street. The person in the lead was a well-dressed man in a black robe, calmly walking over. Yu Qianqiu's gaze fell on Ju beside him. The identity of the person who could make Ju accompany him was obvious. In addition, he had seen this person's appearance in the portraits of the various World Chamber of Commerce branches. Although he didn't have the sage-like demeanor in the portraits, Who else could it be other than Bai-Kong? A late-stage soul formation expert, one of the top 10 experts in the world, Bai-Kong, had come in person. Chapter 599. Bai-Kong was also sizing up Yu Qianqiu. He had seen the portrait of Niu Yud sent by the branch. After identifying him, a smile appeared on his face. He quickened his pace and left the entourage behind him, striding towards a clear goal. It's Bai-Kong. A young man's eyes widened. He couldn't help but shout, but was slapped by the teacher next to him. The latter whispered, "You dare to call him by his name here? Do you want to die?" The young man shut his mouth in embarrassment. Niu Yud's limelight was instantly stolen by Bai-Kong. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Bai-Kong's figure as he moved forward. One of the top 10 experts in the world. There were only a few spirit-severing late-stage experts in the world. For most people, he was a legendary figure that they had never seen before. This person usually lived on the God of Wealth Peak in the Treasure Basin. Although it felt close at hand, not everyone had the opportunity to see him. Usually, everyone would look up at the peak, wanting to see the true appearance of one of the top 10 experts through the misty clouds. This was something that every cultivator who entered the Treasure Basin couldn't help but do. After all, not every spirit-severing late-stage expert could live so close to them. How could other spirit-severing late-stage experts give everyone the opportunity to look up at them? Especially the legendary #1 expert in the world, Bai Chongqun. Most cultivators only knew of this legend in the demon domain. Apart from those spirit-severing late-stage experts, who else had seen him? Even if Bai Chongqun appeared on the street at this time, who would recognize him? This legendary figure at the peak of the cultivation world, every time he appeared, it would be earth-shattering, shocking the entire cultivation world. When everyone arrived at the place where the legend once appeared, there was no trace of him. It made people sigh. They didn't even have the opportunity to look up at him. Although the God of Wealth Peak was just a misty mountain, it was enough to make the hearts of the cultivators who entered this place feel heavy. This was because the first thing that caught the eyes of the cultivators who came here was this mountain peak where the legendary figure lived. Over time, everyone came here with the mentality of a pilgrimage. Bai-Kong was like this God of Wealth Peak, intimidating the entire treasure basin. Those who came here to do business almost didn't need to be restrained. They obediently did things according to the rules. No one dared to cause trouble. Of course, people like Niu Yud were rare. Other than the disciples of the World Commerce Company, not many people had seen Bai-Kong's true appearance, but the various shops of the Cornucopia World Commerce Company all had Bai-Kong's portrait. No one had seen him in person, but they already knew him. At this moment, the real person appeared, a legend of the cultivation world. The street was quiet, only the footsteps of the dozens of people could be heard. Damn it! This old bastard really gave me face. He actually came to welcome me personally. He really made me proud. Yu Qianqiu was not stingy with his face full of smiles. However, in his heart, he was somewhat grumbling. Unfortunately, it was not convenient for him to use Yu Qianqiu's identity to do bad things. What a waste! The name of Niu Yud could not be used for long. It was too famous, and it would be a pity to lose it. Yan Yu was startled, and she felt a little nervous. She had only heard of this legendary figure for many years, but now he was walking towards her, even though she knew that he was not here for her. When she was still a dozen meters away from Yu Qianqiu, Bai-Kong laughed heartily and said, "I heard that Brother Niu was coming, so I have been waiting for you. However, I still haven't seen Brother Niu at God of Wealth Peak. I was impatient and wanted to meet you, so I came here abruptly. I hope I didn't disturb Brother Niu's mood?" As he said this, he glanced meaningfully at Sleeping Spring Loft. Although these words were a bit mocking, whether it was the content or the face, it was enough. Even Bai-Kong addressed Niu Yud as brother, and in such a respectful manner. This shocked everyone on the street. When they looked at Yu Qianqiu again, their gazes were filled with extreme reverence. Without a doubt, this person was a soul formation final stage expert. Face had to be given to each other. Yu Qianqiu laughed and took 3 steps forward. He cupped his fists and said, "Brother is too polite. I originally wanted to go up the mountain to disturb you after settling a small matter. I didn't expect Brother to personally come. I am quite flattered." As he said this, he felt a bit annoyed. Yin Baikong was someone from the same generation as Master. If Master found out that he was calling him brother, would there be any trouble? The two of them stood face to face and looked at each other. Then they laughed heartily. It was one thing for everyone to give each other face, but for Yin Baikong, if news of his friendship with Niu Yud were to spread, it would increase the pressure on certain people. Especially Fatty Pei, who had just been slapped in the face by Niu Yud. Martial ancestor. Guan Zhongkai saluted while trembling with fear. Greetings, senior. Yulan Do, Yen Yu, and Tian Yi all saluted. At this time, Tian Yi and the others were indescribably excited. Senior Niu was indeed not an ordinary person. To be able to make a soul formation final stage expert, Yin Baikong, personally greet him, as Niu Yud's subordinates, they naturally basked in the limelight. They enjoyed the envious gazes of the crowd. Yin Baikong smiled and raised his hand, indicating that there was no need to be overly courteous. The demeanor of an expert was undoubtedly on full display. When his gaze swept past Li Qiuxiang, he slightly paused. He had just received a report about her, so he naturally knew what was going on. Greetings, Senior Niu. Xikong Ju and the others also saluted. I wonder what it is that made Brother Niu stay? Yin Baikong asked despite knowing the answer. Yu Qianchou waved his hand at Yin Baikong, indicating for him to wait a moment. His face darkened as he roared at Tian Yi and the other two. What do you three want? Hurry up and give them the money you owe them. Damn it. I've heard of people eating and dashing, but I've never heard of people acting so arrogantly in a brothel. It's my bad luck to run into you guys. I've lost all my face. Yin Baikong paused for a moment, then smiled. Tian Yi was terrified as he asked Yen Yu, how much money? Yen Yu forcefully suppressed her pounding heart. Good heavens, two soul formation final stage experts had come at the same time. The Sleeping Spring brothel was truly an honor. Originally, with this face and the influence it brought to the Sleeping Spring brothel, she shouldn't have taken the money. But Yen Yu gritted her teeth and waved at the Sleeping Spring brothel, only to see a trembling woman walking over and fearfully saying, 33 high-grade spirit stones and 16 mid-grade spirit stones. Yen Yu waved her hand, and the woman retreated as if she had been pardoned. Tian Yi was stunned, then said with some disbelief, the three of us didn't do anything in there, we just asked for some things. How could it cost more than 30 high-grade spirit stones? You didn't calculate wrongly, did you? Yen Yu sweetly smiled. I didn't charge you a single spirit stone. You should know that the chairs you broke were all made of high-grade purple Qilin wood. If you don't know the price, why don't you ask around first? Then you'll know if I'm lying or not. Ah. Tian Yi was startled. He had heard of the price of purple Qilin wood furniture. He also knew that she wasn't lying. Without saying anything, he injected his divine sense into his storage bag and found that there weren't even 10 high-grade spirit stones in total. So he weakly asked Hai Wei and Mo Xiaojun, I'm still lacking, do you have any more? The two who were asked looked a little embarrassed. They both glanced at Tian Yi. You still don't know our wealth. Are you deliberately trying to embarrass us? Actually, the three of them were together every day. They all knew exactly how many spirit stones they had. Mo Xiaojun directly untied his storage bag and gave it to him. Hai Wei did the same. They didn't say how much money they had. With a bitter face, Tian Yi injected his divine sense into the two storage pouches and found that it was just as he expected. The spirit stones in the three storage pouches added up to less than 30 upper-grade spirit stones. Anyone could see that the three of them were embarrassed. They were loose cultivators after all. Most of them didn't have a source of spirit stones. It would be strange if they had a lot of money. Li Qiuxiang's face was covered with a cloth. Her expression couldn't be seen. Her hand touched the storage bag at her waist, but there was no movement. It wasn't that she couldn't bear to part with the spirit stones, but she was afraid that Tian Yi wouldn't be able to accept the spirit stones that she had obtained by selling her body. Yin Baikong glanced at Xikong Ju. The latter understood and nodded at Guan Zhongkai. Guan Zhongkai hurriedly took out his storage bag and paid for it in front of Yen Yu. Wait. I can't afford to let others pay for a brothel. I can't afford to lose face. Yu Qianchou stopped Guan Zhongkai, walked over to Tian Yi and the other two storage bags, injected his divine sense into them, and coldly snorted, shoved them back. Then, he took out a piece of purple spirit stone and threw it to Yen Yu. Yen Yu looked at the sparkling purple spirit stone in her hand. She couldn't help but cover her mouth. Everyone stared at the spirit stone in her hand. The legendary top-grade spirit stone? Although the group didn't say anything, their minds instantly became active. Ju quickly glanced at his master, and Baikong's pupils shrunk. His left index finger tapped on the back of his right hand a few times. Then he immediately calmed down. "Let's go, don't embarrass yourself here." Yu Qianqiu cursed at the few of them, then turned around and walked away. A top-grade spirit stone worth 10,000 high-grade spirit stones was casually given, but he didn't mention anything about asking for change. He was really generous. It wasn't in line with his style. "Senior Niu, please wait a moment." Yan Yu called out. Yu Qianqiu turned back and said, "What's wrong? Could it be that a top-grade spirit stone isn't worth 30 high-grade spirit stones?" His words confirmed everyone's guess, and they looked at the purple spirit stone with even more amazement. Yan Yu walked over with a smile, and ambiguously grabbed Yu Qianqiu's hand, stuffing the top-grade spirit stone into his palm, and charmingly said, "Senior must be joking. How would Yan Yu dare to accept such a valuable thing from Senior? To be honest, the reason why I used the excuse of settling accounts to keep Senior here is because Yan Yu has a request." "You have a request?" Yu Qianqiu was startled, and his stomach twisted 7 or 8 times, suspecting that there was some kind of conspiracy. Suddenly, he pointed at Baikong and laughed. "The owner of this place is right in front of you. If you want something, you're asking him. My ability is limited. I can't help you much." His hand that was grabbed retracted. "Beautiful women are good, but it's a big loss. Why did you drag me into this?" Baikong was startled, then he laughed and said, "Brother Niu is too modest. She hasn't even said what it is. How would Brother Niu know you can't help? Why don't you listen to her first? Then it won't be too late." He was also curious. A mere brothel madam actually dared to have ideas about Niu Yud. He wanted to see what she was up to. Chapter 600. Senior is wise. Yan Yu smiled and saluted Baikong. Even though Baikong was experienced and knowledgeable, he couldn't help but feel a bit absent-minded. There was such a beautiful woman in his territory, and he didn't even know about it. The people watching from both sides of the street secretly admired the lady boss. To be able to talk and laugh in front of 2 late-stage spirit-severing experts was not something an ordinary person could do. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the two and began to ponder. Could it be that these two had dug a pit for him to jump into? Thinking about it, he felt that it was very possible. Who knew what the relationship between these two was? He had long heard that Baikong had many lovers, not to mention that they were in the same territory. Thus he smiled at Yan Yu and said, "Let me say this first, my ability is limited. If I can't help, don't blame me for declining." He threw the spirit stones in his hand back into his storage pouch. Since the other party had already said that it wasn't for money, he had already shown his face with the top-grade spirit stones. It wasn't like he was rich. Yan Yu coquettishly looked at him and covered her mouth as she laughed. "I heard that Senior is overflowing with talent. You once wrote a poem in the ghost manner that is still widely praised in the cultivation world. Yan Yu also admires you greatly. Now that I finally have the chance to meet Senior, I naturally have to be thick-skinned and ask Senior to leave behind a poem." "Are you kidding me? What poem can I write? The rumors are wrong. I can't help you with this." Yu Qianqiu didn't even think about it and immediately refused. He had already thought about it. No matter what it was, as long as the other party asked, he would immediately refuse. "Senior, how many pairs of eyes have seen it? Can you even deny this?" Yan Yu was stunned. Seeing Yu Qianqiu shake his head, she couldn't help but look at Baikong with a sad expression. In the end, Baikong's index finger was greatly moved. "What a rare beauty." Baikong's eyebrows twitched and he laughed. "Brother Niu, you're quite good at evading this. You don't know that this matter is known to the whole world. You can't avoid it even if you want to." Borrowing Headmaster Yan's invitation, Brother Niu should consider it as giving me face. There is no harm in leaving behind a famous poem from my cornucopia. Ju could be considered to be someone who understood his master's nature. Seeing his master's actions, he couldn't help but look at Yan Yu a few more times, taking note of her in his heart. In the future, even he wouldn't be able to provoke this woman. Yan Yu didn't think that Baikong would really speak up for her. After a moment of joy, A trace of worry flashed through her eyes as she vaguely guessed something. Then, he looked at Nyo Yud anxiously. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Yin Baikong actually dared to say such words. Then, he really couldn't refute Yin Baikong's words in front of everyone, at least not now. But how could he compose a poem? His eyes inadvertently fell on the signboard of the Spring Slumber Brothel, and a thought flashed through his mind. I can compose a poem for you. Yu Qianqiu chuckled. His brain cells should not be wasted. His hand unknowingly wrapped around Yen Yu's waist and pinched her while he was at it. He whispered in her ear, "But I can't do it for nothing. How are you going to repay me?" Such an ambiguous action caused Yin Baikong's eyebrows to twitch a few times. Sikong Ju looked at his master, then at Nyo Yud. He was truly speechless. This matter was a little troublesome. Those who were paying attention to this side all secretly shook their heads. Sure enough, you can't judge a book by its cover. This Nyo Yud was actually a pervert. Tian Yi and the rest were even more speechless. Yen Yu glanced at Yin Baikong from the corner of her eyes, then whispered to Yu Qianqiu, "As long as Senior takes a liking to it, feel free to take it. Then let's find a chance to talk about repayment in private." Yu Qianqiu let go of her waist. Under everyone's gaze, he put his hands behind his back and pretended to stare at the Spring Slumber Brothel. He really did look like he was about to start writing. I wonder how Brother Yin's handwriting is? Yu Qianqiu asked as he stared at the Spring Slumber Brothel. To be honest, Yin Baikong was currently in a very bad mood. The meat that he wanted to take a bite of was snatched away by someone else in the blink of an eye. It would be strange if he was happy. However, he quickly adjusted his mood. It was just a woman. Moreover, it was a woman who came from a brothel. Compared to his great undertaking, it was really insignificant. There were many women in this world. It was not worth making a fuss with Nyo Yud over such a woman. Yin Baikong had already guessed his plan. He smiled and said, "Although I can write a few words, I'm afraid I can't compare to Brother Nyo's overflowing talent. Let's do it in this Spring Slumber Brothel. I leave a poem and you leave a word. We'll work together and leave a beautiful story in the cultivation world. What do you think?" Yu Qianqiu casually said. He said it casually, but Yin Baikong took it to heart, especially when he said, "Let's work together." It made him smile widely, and he replied with deep meaning, "All right, that's exactly what I was thinking." Unbeknownst to him, Yu Qianqiu did it because his words were not good enough. Otherwise, why would Yin Baikong be in the limelight for such a flashy event? Yu Qianqiu faced the Spring Slumber Brothel with his hands behind his back. He nodded and immediately recited without hesitation, "Spring sleeps without knowing the dawn. Everywhere I hear birds singing. The wind and rain come at night. How many flowers fall?" After reciting, he turned to look at Yin Baikong and nodded slightly. "That's it." Yin Baikong was stunned. He silently pondered for a moment before raising his hand and pointing at the slanted wall at the entrance of the Spring Slumber Brothel. His 2 fingers trembled fiercely. Chi chi, the stone wall a few meters away flew into the air. In the blink of an eye, 4 large words appeared. Each word was vigorous and forceful, as if carved by a knife or axe. Overall, it looked like a dancing dragon and a dancing phoenix. It was indeed beautiful. At the same time, it also showed Yin Baikong's profound cultivation. These words were not directly drawn by qi. Instead, wherever the qi went, the stones around the words shattered, causing each word to stand out on the wall. To be able to control the hardness and softness of qi to such an extent, and to do it from a distance, it was definitely not something an ordinary cultivator could do. The World Commerce Chamber of Commerce disciples all revealed proud expressions. The others were secretly shocked. As expected of a late-stage soul formation expert. Damn it! What's there to be proud of when I tell you to write a few words? Are you afraid that others don't know you're a late-stage soul formation expert? Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart but praised, "Brother Yin, your words are really good." "You flatter me." Yin Baikong laughed and then asked, "Do you have a name for the poem?" "Let's call it." Yu Qianqiu looked at the Spring Slumber Brothel signboard and chuckled, "Let's call it Spring Slumber Brothel." This person is really... Yin Baikong shook his head without saying anything. He raised his hand and with a few swishing sounds, the 3 words, Spring Slumber Brothel, appeared in a bigger font. Thank you, seniors. Yen Yu bowed. Although she said it sincerely, it was a little insincere because she didn't see anything good about the poem and thought Niu Yud was just brushing her off. She recited, "Spring sleeps without knowing the dawn, everywhere I hear the singing birds. The wind and rain come at night. How many flowers fall?" When she read the second line, she sensed a bit of ambiguity and couldn't help but roll her eyes at Niu Yud. The last two lines made people's imaginations roam. To be honest, Baikong didn't see anything special before, but after Yen Yu recited it and then looked at the spring slumber brothel signboard, he suddenly had an expression of realization. He cheerfully said to Yu Qianqiu, "Brother Niu is indeed overflowing with talent. This poem is truly wondrous to the extreme." Yu Qianqiu chuckled and came over to put his arm around Yen Yu's waist, saying, "I'll keep the poem, I'll come ask for payment when I have time." After saying that, he laughed and left. He gestured to Baikong, and the two of them led the group of people away. Yen Yu looked at Niu Yud's departing figure with a sense of loss and murmured, "He's a romantic scholar." As soon as they left, a large group of people appeared from the shops on both sides of the street and crowded outside the spring slumber brothel. In an instant, the place was packed with people, competing to see the masterpiece left behind by two late-stage soul formation cultivators. In the distance, there were still people coming after hearing the news. Good poem, it really is a good poem. As expected of Senior Niu's masterpiece, the more I look at it, the more interesting it becomes. A person rubbed his hands and laughed lewdly, occasionally glancing at the spring slumber brothel and the poem. He couldn't help but touch the storage pouch on his waist, clenched his teeth, and entered the spring slumber brothel. There was no lack of dull people in the crowd. Seeing the strange smiles on everyone's faces, they couldn't understand it, so they shamelessly asked their friend beside them, "What's so funny?" Their friend laughed wickedly and pointed at the spring slumber brothel. "All the mysteries can be solved in the spring slumber brothel." "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go in and take a look." That person couldn't wait to pull his friend along. His friend grabbed him and laughed. "Spring sleeps without knowing the dawn, birds chirping everywhere, the wind and rain come at night, who knows how many flowers have fallen. Hee. Now is not the time. Come back at night. I guarantee you that after a night, you will understand the meaning of these 4 lines." A young cultivator flipped the poem over and over several times. Seeing his senior martial brother beside him was laughing lewdly, he couldn't help but ask, "Senior martial brother, this poem is very simple. I don't see anything good about it?" Snickers came from the side, then someone said, "Xiao Lu, take your junior martial brother and leave. Senior Niu's poem is very profound. You won't be able to understand it until you're old enough." The surrounding people immediately laughed. Xiao Lu hurriedly grabbed his junior martial brother and ran away. After squeezing out of the crowd, he immediately scolded his junior martial brother, "What do you know at such a young age? How dare you talk about Senior Niu's masterpiece? Go back to the shop." "Senior martial brother, where are you going?" the junior martial brother asked. Xiao Lu, who was about to squeeze back into the crowd, glared and said, "I'm going to read Senior Niu's poem again, then I'll go back later, you go first." In front of the spring slumber brothel, the crowd didn't disperse for a long time. However, it was full, and there was actually a long queue outside. Yen Yu sneered at the sight, silently cursing that all men were bad. She immediately ordered someone to draw up a new notice board and hang it up. The price was tripled. Immediately, complaints came from all directions, but now that the spring slumber brothel was more confident, and the lady boss had an ambiguous relationship with Niu Yud, who dared to cause trouble here? It was more like courting death. The World Commerce Chamber of Commerce took special care of the spring slumber brothel, even sending a law enforcement team to stand guard here. Although there were complaints, there were still some curious people who didn't give up and refused to return. In the end, the long queue wasn't scared off by the high price. It was so noisy that the business of the nearby restaurants immediately became popular. Chapter 601. At the foot of God of Wealth Peak, Tianyi and the others stayed behind. The two main characters didn't ask for anyone's company and headed up the mountain. Baikong, who had just reached the peak, saw Yu Chencho's late arrival. He looked at the flying sword and asked in confusion, "Brother Niu, what do you mean?" "I'm currently cultivating a sword technique, so I often use the sword as a substitute for walking. Yu Qianzhou's words were a little mysterious. Yin Baikong nodded. Since it was a secret regarding the other party's cultivation, it wasn't good to ask further. Wind and clouds were drifting on the mountain peak. A not too big nor too luxurious palace appeared cold and cheerless. On the signboard were the words, Hall of Wealth. Outside the palace was a green stone slab with a pine tree beside it. Looking at the sea and clouds from this place really gave one a feeling of transcendence. Yu Qianzhou surveyed the surroundings, and he couldn't help but click his tongue as he looked at the mountain range that was covered in floating clouds and auspicious clouds. It really is a blessed land. Brother Yin really knows how to pick a place. Brother Niu is overpraising me. Compared to Brother Niu's blessed land, there is still a gap. Alright. Yin Baikong was puzzled. Where does Brother Niu live? Why haven't I heard of Brother Niu's name before? With Brother Niu's cultivation, you shouldn't be a nobody in the cultivation world. Could it be that I'm ignorant? It was time to get to the main topic. Yu Qianzhou smiled faintly and shook his head. It's not that Brother Yin is ignorant. It's just that you've never been to the place I come from. The place I've never been to? Yin Baikong's eyes flickered as he pondered. If there's a place I haven't been to in this world, it would be the eastern sacred lands and dense fog forest. Could it be that Brother Niu comes from one of these two? Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly and said, the latter. Dense fog forest? Yin Baikong was shocked. To be more precise, I only came from dense fog forest. I'm not from there. Yu Qianzhou smiled meaningfully. Brother Niu, I don't quite understand what you're trying to say. Could you elaborate a little more? Yin Baikong's eyes flickered. Yu Qianzhou was not in a hurry to reply. He took out a golden robe from his storage bag and slowly put it on. After tidying himself up a little, his entire temperament became arrogant. Standing at the peak of the mountain, his golden robe shone with golden light under the sun. After that, he took out a simple and unadorned treasured sword. The tip of the sword was pointed at the ground, and both his hands were placed on his abdomen, supporting the hilt. He looked into the distance silently, his expression solemn and respectful. Yin Baikong squinted his eyes. He could immediately tell that the golden robe was extraordinary. He had been in the World Chamber of Commerce for so many years and had seen countless things. There was almost no refining material in the world that he did not recognize. However, he couldn't tell what material this golden robe was made of. Especially when he looked at the treasured sword. His pupils suddenly shrank. The patterns on the treasured sword were simple and unadorned, and he seemed to have seen similar patterns in the fragmented ancient texts. With his eyesight and cultivation, he could tell at a glance that this treasured sword contained immense power. Its quality was definitely not inferior to a high-grade spirit treasure. He really wanted to release his divine sense to check the golden robe and treasured sword, but doing so without permission was taboo in the cultivation world. The other party could take it as a provocation. Then again, if it was someone with a lower cultivation than him, he would not hesitate to forcefully check it. However, this person was Niu Yud, whose cultivation was no weaker than his. Just based on the fact that he couldn't see through the other party's cultivation, he could prove this point. Brother Niu, what are you doing? Yin Baikong asked in confusion. Yu Qianzhou coldly glanced at him and said indifferently, there is an immortal ascension stage in the fog forest. On the immortal ascension stage hangs an immortal ascension horn. Any cultivator whose cultivation has broken through to the late stage of soul formation can head to the immortal ascension stage and blow the immortal ascension horn. An envoy from the celestial world will descend and bring them to the celestial world. Some time ago, a young man called Yu Qianzhou barged into the immortal ascension stage and blew the immortal ascension horn by mistake. This envoy was summoned here. Ah! Yin Baikong was dumbfounded. There really was an immortal ascension stage in the fog forest. He was actually the envoy from the celestial world. Yin Baikong's mind was in a daze as he listened to the other party continue. Who knew that this Yu Qianzhou's cultivation hadn't even reached the soul formation stage, let alone the late stage of soul formation? What nonsense! In a fit of anger, this envoy wanted to kill him, but I was also curious. With his cultivation, how could he barge into the fog forest? Who knew that even he couldn't figure it out? Thus, I left the misty forest to investigate the cause of this matter. If I don't figure it out, what if anyone could barge into the fog forest and blow the immortal ascension horn? Wouldn't that be a joke? At this point, Yu Qiancho's expression became indifferent. He turned to look at Yin Baikong and asked, "Brother Yin, where do you think I came from?" Yin Baikong swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He didn't know how to answer. After listening to Niu Yud's words and thinking about what happened during this period of time, he felt that all the fog had been lifted. No wonder he had never heard of Niu Yud in the cultivation world. With such a high cultivation, it was impossible for him to not show his face in the cultivation world. No wonder Niu Yud only appeared in the cultivation world after Yu Qiancho barged into the fog forest. It turned out that Niu Yud was accidentally lured here by that rascal Yu Qiancho. No wonder Niu Yud didn't put any experts in the cultivation world in his eyes. With his identity as an envoy from the celestial world, did he need to be afraid of cultivators from the cultivation world? There was also the restriction-breaking pill that could forcefully increase one's cultivation, and the top-grade spirit stone that he casually threw down the mountain. This series of events all showed that he had an extraordinary background. Looking at the ancient sword with extraordinary power and the golden robe shining with a golden glow, Yin Baikong was completely convinced, but it was still hard for him to accept it. The person standing in front of him was actually an immortal from the celestial world? The story of immortals descending to the human world only existed in legends. He didn't expect to see it in person. It was really unimaginable. Brother Niu. Yin Baikong felt that this title was a bit awkward. He didn't know if it was appropriate to call him that now. Yu Qiancho smiled faintly and put away his sword. He took off his golden robe and put it away as well. Then he said, "Brother Yin, don't worry about it. You and I will continue as before. However, I have to say one thing first. Regarding my identity, you can't tell anyone else. Other than you, only Yu Qiancho knows my identity. However, I've already warned that brat. He won't reveal it. I can't wait to block the news of such a good thing. Why would I tell anyone else?" Yin Baikong hid the surprise in his heart and forcefully maintained his poise. He nodded and said, "Brother Niu, don't worry. I won't tell anyone else about your identity." "All right." Yin Baikong seemed to suddenly remember something. He frowned and asked, "Brother Niu, do you still remember the matter with Yan Xueqi? I'm ashamed to say that I doubted Brother Niu before. But now, I'm completely convinced. I want to ask Brother Niu, what's going on with that Yan Xueqi?" "Hee. I've also heard about the matter of you guys chasing after Yan Xueqi. I was just casually mentioning it. I didn't expect such a thing to happen. As for whether people believe me or not, what does that have to do with me? However, there's one thing that's beyond doubt." Yu Qiancho said with a solemn expression, "That Yan Xueqi's cultivation technique is not simple. I didn't expect there to be such a tyrannical cultivation technique in the human world. I'm really surprised. If it wasn't for the fact that my cultivation technique is special and that I've been restricted in the immortal world to a certain extent, making it unsuitable for me to change to another cultivation technique, I would have personally captured that kid and studied him carefully. That's strange. Brother Niu's eyes are definitely not wrong. However, Bing Qingzi actually dared to make a false oath. Isn't he afraid of retribution?" Yin Baikong was puzzled. "I've heard about it. To be honest, I can't figure it out either." Yu Qiancho pondered and said, "Could it be that this cultivation technique is more powerful than I imagined? That it can make people protect it even at the risk of retribution? No, there should be other reasons. How could there be such a heaven-defying cultivation technique in the human world? Otherwise, the immortal world wouldn't just sit and watch." Yin Baikong's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. He then asked tentatively, "Could it be that there's some heaven-defying cultivation technique in the human world that even the immortal world knows about? Could it be that you think Yan Xueqi can create some heaven-defying cultivation technique?" Yu Qiancho asked in reply. He then snorted and said, "In the ancient times, there were some heaven-defying figures in this world. They almost changed the immortal world's dynasty. However, they were still exterminated in the end. Everything that should be destroyed has been destroyed. It's impossible for any heaven-defying cultivation technique to be left behind." That's not necessarily true. There are no absolutes in everything. Yin Baikong felt his heart beating faster. There was actually someone in this world who almost changed the immortal world's dynasty? Suppressing his emotions, he said calmly, Since the immortal world has already exterminated them, there shouldn't be any more. Brother Niu doesn't need to worry. I will think of a way to investigate that Yan Xueqi. If there's anything, I will inform Brother Niu. Yes. Investigate properly. Investigate Yan Xueqi to death. I have confidence in the power of your World Commerce Association. Don't waste my efforts. Yu Qianqiu nodded and changed the topic. Brother Yin, I wonder if you've prepared the remaining 800 million high-grade spirit stones? Yin Baikong felt his heart ache. He forced a smile and said, I promised Brother Niu. Naturally, I won't go back on my word. However, there's one thing I don't know. Brother Niu is the immortal world's envoy. Do you still lack spirit stones? Brother Yin might not know. Spirit stones are also used in the immortal world. Sigh. Yu Qianqiu suddenly shook his head and sighed. Brother Yin, don't think that being the immortal world's envoy is so great. It's really nothing in the immortal world. I'm ashamed. Hee hee. Brother Niu is too humble. Yin Baikong's words were pleasant to hear. However, he was coldly snorting in his heart. It would be strange if an errand boy from the immortal world could be anything. Not long after he said that, Ju came over with a few storage bags. Yin Baikong took the storage bags and waved his hand to dismiss Ju. He then handed the storage bags to Yu Qianqiu. The latter naturally accepted it without hesitation. Brother Niu, when will the limit-breaking pill be refined? Yin Baikong asked. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.